can see, we're trying to accommodate our folks on the phone. And so now, following our playbook here, hopefully we're all on the right page. Number 13, policy matters, state and federal legislative matters with Carrie.
Good morning,
Welcome,
Commissioners. Commissioners, agenda item 13 is a pink and an action item. Friday, tomorrow, May 29th, is the last day for fiscal committees to hear and report to the floor bills introduced in their House. June 5th is the last day for bills to pass from the House of Origin, and June 15th by midnight is the deadline for the budget bill. Staff are currently monitoring 75 bills identified in Attachment B that meet the criteria approved by the Commission. Out of the 75 bills we are monitoring, staff is recommending the Commission take a position of support on Senate Bill 16 today. Senate Bill 16, introduced by Senator Bell, creates a road maintenance rehabilitation program to address deferred maintenance on the state highway system and the local streets and road system. This bill would provide for a program to be authorized every 5 years by the legislature and would provide that initial authorization for the years 15, 16 through 2019, 2020. The Commission will be required to identify the estimated funds to be available for the RMRP, or the Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Program, and adopt performance criteria to ensure efficient use of the funds. SB 16 would be continuously appropriating the funds in the account for the road maintenance and rehabilitation purposes for each 5-year period in which the legislature has authorized the program, and would, for those fiscal years, allocate 5% of the available funds to counties that approve a transactions and use tax on or after July 1st, 2015, with the remaining funds to be allocated 50% for maintenance of state highway system or to the shop, and 50% to cities and counties pursuant to a specified formula. SB 16 would transfer revenues from 2 cents of the 12-cent increase in the diesel fuel excise tax to the Trade Corridors Improvement Fund for expenditure on eligible projects. Currently, Caltrans prepares the shop every other year based on an asset management plan for the expenditures of transportation capital improvement funds for projects that are necessary to preserve and protect the state highway system. For each project in the shop, Caltrans is currently required to specify the capital and support budget and projected delivery date for various components of the project. The Commission, in turn, is required to review and adopt the program. However, the Commission can decline to adopt the program if it determines that the program is not sufficiently consistent with the asset management plan. SB 16 would require the Commission on or after February 1st, 2017 to make an allocation of all capital and support costs for each project in the program, and would require Caltrans to submit a supplemental project allocation request to the Commission for each project that experienced cost increases above the amount of its allocation. SB 16 would require the Commission to establish guidelines to provide exceptions to the requirement for the supplemental project allocation requirement that the Commission determines are necessary to ensure that projects are not unnecessarily delayed. Existing law requires Caltrans to prepare and submit to the Governor a proposed budget and to develop budgeting, accounting, fiscal control, and management information systems to provide budget oversight. SB 16 would require Caltrans to present to the Commission by April 1st, 2016, a plan to increase department efficiency by up to 30% over the subsequent 3 years, with the ongoing savings to result in increased capital expenditures in the shop or an increase in the state highway maintenance program. Commissioners, Senate Bill 16 will have a fiscal impact on the Commission due to additional staff resources needed to fulfill the statutory requirements. Fiscal impacts are estimated at approximately $565,000. The details of the cost are explained in Attachment A. SB 16 is consistent with the Commission's position on addressing the state's transportation funding challenges. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission adopt a position of support on SB 16 and direct staff to prepare and transmit to the author a letter of support. I will come back to that recommendation later. I have some other bills that I'd like to update you on.
So are we taking a separate action item on that bill before we do the other stuff? Is that the plan?
We can do it either way. I've got it at the end as well.
It's the chair's prerogative, I think.
Yeah.
I had a question on this item, but
Why don't we take this item first and separately with the questions that we've got? Go ahead, Commissioner Assemi.
Carrie, could you go over the funding source again?
The funding source,
Yeah. You excise tax.
okay.
I can pretty well tell you
Yeah,
what it
thank
is.
you.
It's about 10 cents for cars, it's 12 cents for
Thank you.
trucks. There's a vehicle registration fee of $35. There is a vehicle license fee increase that would be phased in to a total of 0.35% on the value of a vehicle over 5 years, and that would be used primarily, I believe, under Senator Bell's bill to offset the transfer of truck weight fees back to the State Highway Fund, which would be transferred at the same rate. So those two sort of pencil each other out in terms of new funding. Does that take care of your question?
Yeah, so these are all new
Yeah.
added revenue.
Yes.
Any of that is going to compensate CTC for staff cost? How's that going to be addressed?
We'll figure it out. Well, I'm sure that we'll make sure you guys get enough staff to get it done.
And Madam Chair, members, what we would do is that in the next budget cycle, we'll request the additional resources to meet the needs assigned by this legislation and any other legislation.
Very good.
I would move support of the bill.
Got a
I would
motion?
second that.
Second. Before we take a vote, are there any members wishing to address us on public comments on this action item on the phone? Excellent. Okay. No, thank you. So motion for support. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Very good. Matter passes. Thank you very much, Carrie. Next items.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, and for the record, Joe Tavaloni? Aye. Thank you. Unanimous. Carl's not on yet.
All right.
Go ahead.
The following bills are some bills of interest to the Commission. Senate Constitution Amendment, introduced by Senator Huff, makes changes to Article 19 of the state constitution to place limits on how transportation taxes and fees can be used. Specifically, SCA 7 prohibits the borrowing of Section 2 revenues, instituting an across-the-board 25% limit on Section 2 revenues that can be used for bond indebtedness. Additionally, SCA 7 prohibits the borrowing of fuel excise tax revenues or vehicle licensing revenues that exceed 65% of the market value of a vehicle. SCA 7 is currently at the Senate Transportation Housing Committee, and staff will continue monitoring this bill. SB 54, introduced by Senator Allen, would establish procedures for relinquishment of portions of the state highway system without explicit legislative authorization. Specifically, this bill would authorize the Commission to relinquish a portion of the state highway to the city or county under the following conditions. 1, if the segment is within the boundaries of the local agency. 2, the segment is not an interstate highway or part of an interregional road system. 3, Caltrans has entered into an agreement with the recipient agency. And 4, Caltrans has placed the highway in a state of good repair. SB 254 would require Caltrans to not later than April 1st, 2016, and biannually thereafter, report to the Commission on which state highway routes or segments primarily serve regional travel and do not primarily facilitate interregional movement of people and goods, identifying which of those routes and segments are the best candidates for relinquishment. This bill intends to streamline the relinquishment process and enhances the Commission's role in approving relinquishments. The Commission would be required to hold public hearings for relinquishments, develop guidelines for Caltrans reporting, and include a list of relinquishments completed in the annual report to the legislature. Commissioners, Senate Bill 254 will have a fiscal impact on the Commission due to additional staff resources needed to fulfill the statutory requirements. The fiscal impacts are estimated at $109,000. The details of the cost are explained in Attachment A. SB 254 is currently held in suspense and is to be heard in appropriations today. Staff will continue to monitor this bill.
What,
Yes.
can we ask questions?
Absolutely.
What's the need for the change?
Stephen. I'm sure that, that's Stephen.
I believe this is part of the department's effort to streamline relinquishments. And they've proposed that they no longer go to the legislature first for statutory changes before they come to the commission. How all of this is going to work out, I'm not quite sure yet.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments? Great. Keep going.
SB 64, introduced by Senator Liu, would require the Commission to review the recommendations and update to the California Transportation Plan prepared by Caltrans, providing specific action-oriented and pragmatic recommendations to the legislature and the governor beginning in 2015 and every 5 years thereafter. Commissioners, SB 64 does not have an immediate fiscal impact on the Commission. However, in future years, specifically in 17 and 18, when the limited term position anticipated to be authorized in the 15-16 budget year in response to Senate Bill 486, which was passed at last legislative session, expires, this legislation will have a fiscal impact on the Commission budget. Fiscal impacts are further explained in Attachment A. SB 64 passed out of the Senate to the Assembly. Staff will continue to monitor this bill. Commissioners, in March, you took a position of support on AB 194, which is the Hot Lane bill by Frazier, as well as AB 1265, the P3 bill. Both of these bills are held in suspense and will be heard in appropriations today. Both bills will have a fiscal impact on the Commission due to consulting services fundings required to fulfill the statutory requirements. Based on historical data, it is estimated that AB 194, the Hot Lane bill, would require an additional $200,000 for the evaluation and processing of each of the Caltrans applications, Hot Lane applications. The regional transportation planning applications could potentially be reimbursed through the bill. AB 1265 would require an additional $300,000 for the processing of each P3 application. As Malcolm and Vince mentioned, HR 2353, I don't need to go in further unless you have any questions about that particular bill. It is expected to be signed by the President hopefully this week. Commissioners, that concludes, I do have one more thing. SB 321, the Val bill. As Renee mentioned, there has been some movement on this bill. If you recall, this bill would require BOE to smooth out the motor vehicle fuel tax rate by averaging the actual fuel price over the 4 previous years. SB 321 was amended on the Senate floor yesterday, removing the urgency clause and specifying that revenue neutrality will be maintained each year. Commissioners, that concludes my report. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the staff report and provide any direction on any other legislation.
We have a question from Commissioner Art.
So regarding SB 321, have we taken a position on it, or are we just continuing to watch it?
We just were monitoring. Support and concept.
So I guess my question is, considering that the concept of the bill is to try to basically put more stability in the annual calculation that is used to fix the, to set the price-based excise tax each year. We've seen quite a bit of volatility in that. The idea was to go back and look at how that's calculated, and it doesn't really, on the long term, I think, give more or less money to the system, but the idea would be to smooth it out, lengthen the average that you're calculating so that you don't have this going on, you have kind of like this going on, and makes it a little easier for planning agencies to figure out how much money they're going to have from one year to the next from this source. I guess my question would be, what are we waiting for in terms of taking a position on this particular bill?
And I note that we show it as a support in concept.
Yes.
You have taken a position.
So we have taken a position on it in support and concept. Do you want something more
Okay.
formal?
Well, it is a sort of the sands are shifting on that politically, so I think being able to make sure that everyone knows the CTC supports this bill in concept, hopefully, however they work that out, that we're going to be better off than we have been, is sufficient for my needs at this point. I just want to make sure that we weren't just, like, sitting on the fence.
And Madam Chair, we have sent a letter to the author, so we are on record support and concept for the bill. I will tell you, the removal of the urgency clause has an impact, because the urgency clause would have allowed the bill to go into effect immediately on signature by the governor, assuming he would sign that. Removal of the urgency clause makes this a regular bill, and it would not go into effect if it passes until January 1st. So the 6-cent reduction in the price-based excise tax would go into effect on July 1st and have an impact for that, at least that 6-month period. And that's roughly $430 million less in gas tax revenues over that period.
I think the one exception, I agree with what Mr. Kempton has said. I think the one possible exception to that is that if this language ends up in a trailer bill as part of the budget process, we might still be able to avoid that. But that's pretty speculative at this point. Don't really know, what's in everybody's little package of negotiations.
I did have a discussion with Senator Bell on this, and he is aware of the impact of removing the urgency clause and is looking at all his options.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to ask a question about that bill.
Secretary Kelly, of course.
The other language that was amended in the bill had to do with revenue neutrality. And is the language to express that revenue neutrality is maintained annually?
Good question.
I think that's what the intent was.
Does that achieve your objectives?
I don't know.
Now, I don't think it does, frankly, and the issue is that a number of members of the legislature have been persuaded that the proposal in SB 321 actually constitutes a tax increase. And so I don't understand that, and if you spread out the process over 5 years, it seems to me you're still maintaining revenue neutrality. And so I would hope that that language is simply indicating that the intent of the legislation is to maintain revenue neutrality. And smoothing the process out over a longer period of time helps us eliminate those radical ups and downs in terms of the adjustment every year. I'm kind of at a loss, frankly.
And I just want to be clear, I was just asking because it's the first I've heard of the amendments, and I thought, is it achieving what the bill was initially designed to achieve?
Yeah.
We'll certainly watch it.
Okay. Very good. Any more comments, questions, commissioners? Yes, Cindy.
Well, I think one person's challenge is another opportunity. So, Carrie, I know while you have a lot of bills to watch, I want us all to salute the fact that there is recognition in the legislature that our infrastructure is in need of some boosts. So, thankfully, some of these bills will move forward and we'll see some increased investments.
Very good. All right. Carrie, are you looking for a motion to accept the report?
Sure.
Okay. We've taken a motion on Senator Bell's bill, and so now a motion to accept.
Motion to accept on the condition that she repeat everything she just said so we can really understand it. Just kidding. A motion to accept.
Very good, and the second?
Second.
The next second, motion by Mr. Arp, second by Ms. Inman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstention? And Mr. Tavaloni? Aye. You're sort of like the fourth wheel here. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Motion passes. All right, moving from legislative matters to item number 14, Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee and Pilot Program Update with Laura Pennebaker.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning, Laura.
This is an informational item to provide you with an update on the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee and Pilot Program Design process. At the March and April TAC meetings, preliminary decisions were made regarding road charge operational concepts, enabling technologies, and system architecture features that will be further explored or tested in the pilot program. These methods and concepts include offering both manual and technology-based mileage measurement and reporting methods, including out-of-state drivers in the pilot, testing interoperability of California's pilot with other states, and offering pilot participants a choice of multiple account managers in the program. These initial decisions were made considering issues such as privacy, equity, and data security, and they are subject to further refinement and adjustment throughout the TAC's deliberative process. The TAC has also reached several milestones with respect to its stakeholder engagement and outreach process, including convening the Road Charge Pilot Work Group to serve as a resource for the TAC, facilitating stakeholder feedback through email outreach and the launch of an interactive new website for the California Road Charge Pilot Program, as well as engaging elected officials on the issue of pilot program design through informational briefings. Briefings conducted to date are listed in your book item, and most recently, Executive Director Kempton and Chief Deputy Branson met with Assembly Member Kevin Mullins last week. Staff also wanted to highlight that the TAC received a letter yesterday from CalSTA notifying the committee of the administration's request through the May revise to accelerate completion of the pilot program by approximately 1 year. The letter did specify that the amount of time for the TAC to deliberate and prepare their recommendations will not be affected by this request. The next TAC meeting will be held tomorrow, May 29th, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. here at the Doubletree in ballrooms D2 and D3. The meeting will focus on pilot program characteristics such as what types of participants and vehicles should be included in the pilot, as well as types of road usage that could be exempt from road charging, such as driving on private roads. Tomorrow, the TAC will also identify specific personal privacy protections that will be used in the pilot. We'll discuss the business case analysis of road charging in California, and we'll introduce pilot program evaluation criteria. Tomorrow's TAC meeting will be webcast live, and all meeting materials are available online at www.californiaroadchargepilot.com. That concludes my informational update. I'd be happy to answer any questions if needed.
Very good. Thank you very much. Questions, comments? I do notice that we've gotten a number of press coverage of here in Fresno on road charge issues, and that's all good, but getting the word out. So thank
The
you
word
very
is
much
getting
for that.
out, and we are getting more comments, so it's
And,
very favorable.
Mr. Semi was on my morning news. I had to wake up to his face. Lovely. It was lovely.
Did that make your morning?
It made my morning. You and my coffee. Thank you. Moving on, item number 15, budget and allocation capacity update. Laurel.
Yes, Commissioners, this is an information item. Athena Glidden is here from the department to give us an update on the budget and allocation capacity.
Good morning, Commissioners, Director Dougherty, Secretary Kelly, and Executive Director Kempton. This morning's budget and allocation capacity, we always start with our capacity use. As you can see, we have total allocations of $1.4 billion towards 471 projects through March. Stop. Now, we did a whole section on federal funding, but I believe that this horse has been beat to death. So unless there's later any questions on the details, I believe that the director and FHWA have covered this pretty thoroughly. We did include the Federal Highway Trust Fund just to show that the spending on the Federal Highway Trust Fund is similar in the current year as it was to last year, where it almost went insolvent before getting a general fund infusion in July, which is why the extension is purposely been set for a July period when the funding and the authorization are due to expire almost simultaneously. As for the department, you've heard a little bit about the May revise. A lot of the attention has been on funding issues. However, there's a few other elements that have gone forward as part of the May revise. One of them is our traditional capital outlay support, which is our direct project delivery workload. This year, we had a reduction of approximately $25 million and 178 full-time equivalents. That is due to the winding down of Proposition 1B and the ending of the construction phase of most of the RR projects, so you see less need for the direct support. In addition, we had a $7.6 million increase from PTA, and this is to cover some of the Amtrak costs for intercity rail. There's federal regulations that say that we have to fully fund our short segment rails, and this is to cover that cost. We also got an infusion of $65 million in additional money for the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, which is the program that's managed by agency. Last but definitely not least, is that we put forward a proposal to accelerate the road usage charge pilot program. The idea is to accelerate the program without affecting the schedule of the Technical Advisory Committee. Later components may overlap and compress to allow for early delivery without affecting the quality of the final product. We included this. This actually came from Department of Finance. Thought it was a very nice visual representation that is primarily intended to show how little of the funds that we have received for various purposes have really gone to highway maintenance and repair, which is the clear item at the top. Most of the funding has been for capacity increasing projects or local funding for their repair or transit, but not very much has been for highway repair. So we are extremely happy to hear so much attention coming to the Fix It First area of our highway system. Upcoming events, we have of course, that May 31st date, which we expect that we will get the President's signature on that 2-month extension. In June, we will be coming forward with the draft fund estimate. Stephen will talk more about the fund estimate in his presentation in a moment. And we expect the budget to be enacted on June 30th. I don't see any issue with that. And in August, if there aren't any major funding changes, we should see the adoption of the STIP. Also of note, not on this list, in the next meeting in June, we should be coming up with our draft allocation capacities for both the STIP and the SHOP for next year. And that concludes my presentation.
Good questions? Thank you very much, Dina. Item number 16, an action item, 2016 STIP fund estimate, final assumptions. Laurel?
Yes, Commissioners, this is an action item to approve the assumptions to be used to develop the 2016 fund estimate. The Department is required by statute to develop this estimate based on current law and certain assumptions proposed by the Department and approved by the Commission. Draft assumptions were presented to the Commission at the March 2015 meeting. And I believe Stephen is here to give you a short presentation on what those assumptions are.
Welcome, Stephen.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. You may have noticed I'm trying to get rid of some of my workload, bringing Athena to come and start to present these budget and allocation capacities to you. I was given an opportunity to do that when I had her job, and I think I kind of appreciate having somebody else do that for a change, although it's been really fun doing for the last 7 years. It's always been my favorite item to do. The fund estimate being a very close second, though, because it has such a huge impact on what we do in transportation funding. And today, I'm going to briefly talk about transportation funding assumptions that are going to be included in the fund estimate with your approval, of course. And this is following up with a presentation that I gave at the last commission meeting where we went through these in some detail on the assumptions included in the fund estimate. I should note before I go into it that the detailed changes to our assumptions and an explanation of all the assumptions are included in the book item, which was published with the regular CTC agenda items. The reason we do these assumptions, of course, is that they will greatly impact the capacity that comes out of the fund estimate. There are a lot of things still up in the air. Actually, most of the May revision has now been adopted by the legislature to be included in the final Budget Act. But that Budget Act does need to be in place before we know for sure what's going to happen. And as we've already heard today, there's a lot of pretty exciting opportunities out there for some new funding options that we would include in the fund estimate. And of course, the federal thing. I don't know what to say about that. I'm hoping they've got something in place before we look to adopt a final fund estimate in August. If not, then we'll just sort of go with what we have. So we did make some relatively minor changes to our recommended options in the fund estimate. The first two here detailed on slide number 3 are really technical changes that we made to conform with existing law. I think our original assumptions sort of skipped over the fact that there is a portion of the tax collected on fuel that goes to the general fund. That's the tax on fuel used off highways. So only the part of the taxes that are used on highways comes to transportation. That's been a pretty long-standing issue. When we had done the original draft assumptions, we had excluded that from, or failed to include that in the price-based excise tax. So we updated that assumption. And we also updated the new tax rate for diesel that was not updated in time for the last assumption. Those are relatively minor technical adjustments, and we continue to recommend alternative C of the list of assumptions that we discussed last time. We made a technical adjustment to federal revenue. We had originally escalated federal revenue in the year prior to the fund estimate starting. We're taking that escalation out because we feel that we'll know, hopefully, again, knock on wood, know what the base year federal revenue will be when we adopt the final fund estimate, so we don't need to escalate prior to the fund estimate. That's a relatively minor change, and again, we continue to recommend alternative B of the alternatives we discussed last time. That is to take federal funding at the base year and then escalate at about 1.4% annually, and that's consistent with what was done in the original MAP 21. We didn't make any changes to any of our assumptions regarding the motor vehicle account, which is one of our prime assumptions that we talked about at the last meeting. As mentioned before, there's a lot of pretty exciting opportunities out there. SB 321 will have an impact on fund estimate, especially for the STIP. SB 16 would have a very significant impact for the SHOP as well. We're hoping that some of these will be resolved before the final fund estimate is brought to the Commission in August. And as I've talked about at probably every single meeting, there's always the option to delay adoption if we see some of these things coming down the pike. We can delay adoption to ensure that any revenue changes are included in the fund estimate. And I think given what the fund estimate does in terms of setting our path for the next 5 years for funding, I absolutely urge doing that. We made a few very minor changes to the assumptions, and again, these are just based on new information that we have. We've updated the price index for construction based on a final data for the 2014 calendar year. And we updated one of our assumptions that had erroneously mentioned the environmental enhancement mitigation program. That has been moved out of the transportation arena and over to resources. So we've taken that out, and we've updated the assumption to related to the active transportation program to acknowledge the fact that the Commission adopts a separate active transportation program fund estimate, which we've already adopted this year, and that the new fund estimate for STIP and SHOP will account for that. I'm going to ask the commission to approve these assumptions as I relate to you and as recommended. Then we will then take those assumptions and create the draft fund estimate for presentation to the commission in June. And then, of course, the final fund estimate, as currently scheduled, would be adopted at the August meeting. And again, if we see any of these fine revenue proposals actually happening, if they're not quite done yet, we'd recommend a delay. And with that, I'll take any questions, and then if it's okay with you, I'll ask for your approval with those assumptions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stephen. Questions? Questions, comments? Very good.
Madam Chair, if I could just clarify, Stephen, as we talked earlier, these assumptions do include the 6-cent reduction in the price-based excise tax beginning on July 1st.
That's correct. So these assumptions do include the law as currently written, and that is, as we talked about, I think, in one of the early presentations, the fund estimate is required to assume current law, which is why I keep saying let's delay if there's going to be new laws in place.
This is an action, oh, you have a question? Yes.
Is there any downside for delaying?
Only if the feds come up with some crazy idea. If they...
Vince?
Yeah, well, I'm not noted for my optimism, but I really do think this is a great year to delay because there's good things coming down the pike.
And I would add, we have delayed in the past. I think we adopted the STIP one time in June instead of March, so it has been done in the past.
Very good. Again, this is an action item. We got a motion by Commissioner Inman.
Second.
Second by Mr. Assemi. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
Actually, I do have a question. So gas should come down in July 1st?
So
Theoretically.
yeah, so
6 cents?
So the Board of Equalization has adopted a new rate of 12 cents a gallon, which was a 6-cent reduction to the current rate. Even if SB 321 goes into effect, the gas tax rate will still decrease, but much less than it would have otherwise, because you're taking a 5-year average of the price. It's a far more palatable change. It's something that we can work with. Certainly the 33% reduction in revenue is a huge impact that we don't really want to see.
Okay, we did have a motion. We had an approval, Mr. Tavaloni. Aye. Very good, thank you. Unanimous approval of the assumptions. Thank you, Stephen.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to make sure you knew that I was on the line with Commissioner Gordino.
Mr. Gordino, and we just took a vote on the assumptions. You heard the report. Did you have a...
Yes, I heard the report and I voted, but I wasn't sure you heard me vote.
We did not hear you. I just now learned that you're on, so welcome aboard. So unanimous with Mr. Gordino and Mr. Tavaloni. Thank you. And now we move on to the item number 17, comments on the California Transportation Plan 2040. Carrie.
Well, this agenda item, Commissioners, is a pink and is an action item, and it'll probably be as long as the ledge item. Pursuant to federal regulation and state statute, Caltrans is required to prepare a statewide long-range transportation plan known as the California Transportation Plan, CTP. In 2009, Senate Bill 391 expanded the statutory requirement of the CTP, specifically directing Caltrans to complete the CTP 2040 by December 2015 and every 5 years thereafter, and further specified Caltrans address how the state will achieve maximum feasible emissions reductions in order to attain the statewide reduction of greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by 2020 and 80% below the 1990 levels by 2050. SB 391 also directed Caltrans to prepare an interim report by December 2012. The Commission considered this interim report in March of 2013, providing comments to Caltrans recommending the CTP include a summarization of MPO efforts to generate forecasted development patterns captured in sustainable community strategies that meet state housing goals, assess how regional forecasted development patterns and influence the configuration of the statewide integrated multimodal transportation system in the CTP, and ensure early and continuous coordination during the development of the CTP with the State Department of Housing and Community Development and other agencies and stakeholders. With the passage of SB 486 in 2014, the Commission has an expanded role in the development of future CTPs through the development of guidelines and the identification of study areas and evaluations by Caltrans. The preparation of the draft CTP 2040 has been an arduous task. Caltrans needs to be applauded for the time and effort that went into the coordination and collaboration with the stakeholders, the compiling of the data, and the drafting of the plan. The CTP 2040 is a critical component in guiding the long-term planning and forming the basis for future investment decisions that will affect California's transportation system. In an effort to assist in the guiding of the development of the final CTP 2040, staff has prepared the attached comment letter for the Commissioner's consideration. In summary, the staff are recommending the following 6 comments. First, balancing California's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals with economic and other goals is critical to ensure the vitality of future generations. The economic impacts resulting from the actions planned to reduce GHG emissions from the planned transportation system should be clearly and transparently identified and considered. Great care should be taken in the development of this plan to ensure that necessary strategies are incorporated for a robust and thriving economy through 2040 and beyond. Second, the CTP places little emphasis on current and planned efforts within the legislature, administration, local government, and private industry to promote technology improvements underway that will reduce GHG emissions. For example, the CTP does not transparently integrate California Air Resources Board's low carbon fuel standard, the draft Sustainable Freight Initiative, or Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund strategies, despite that these strategies are anticipated to reduce GHG emissions from the transportation sector. Third, the draft CTP refers numerous times to the road user charge as a method to reduce VMT by increasing vehicle operating costs. SB 1077 provided for a process to guide the development and evaluation of a pilot program to assess the potential for a road mileage-based revenue collection for California's roads and highways as an alternative to the gas tax system. The pilot program is intended to identify and evaluate issues related to the potential implementation of the road usage charge program in California. The objective of SB 1077 is to explore a road usage charge program as an alternative to the existing gas tax structure. As proposed in the draft CTP, the road usage charge could be used to encourage a reduction in VMT by increasing the vehicle operating costs. Language in the CTP regarding the road usage charge and incorrect references to SB 1077 should be revised to reflect current legislative direction. Fourth, funding, including cap and trade, will be a key issue to the implementation of actions identified in each of the 3 CTP alternatives. We encourage Caltrans to include an estimate of and identify likely sources for the funding necessary to implement each of the individual actions identified in the alternatives and recommendations chapter of the CTP. We also recommend Caltrans refine and prioritize the individual recommendations, clearly identifying the priorities, timeline, practicality, cost, funding source proposed, and implementation responsibilities. Fifth, road capacity expansion projects, in addition to other project types, must be strategically planned to address California's growing population and promote a robust economy. Further funding required for road capacity expansion projects must be identified to address population growth, land use decisions, the need for economic vitality, and safety of its motorized and non-motorized public and other factors. To meet California's goals, the need for transportation projects of all types must be considered and strategically planned. Statements such as to avoid projects at road capacity and any transportation projects on the state highway system or on local streets and roads that are capacity increasing should not be supported for funding, should be removed from the final CTP. Finally, it is critical that the CTP provide for a transportation network that aligns with projections for land use and housing, as recommended by the Commission in the response to the interim report provided by Caltrans provided to Caltrans in March 2013. The Commission continues to recommend the CTP reflect a summarization of the regional efforts to generate forecasted development patterns and adopted regional transportation plans and meet state housing goals, and assess how such efforts influence the configuration of the statewide integrated multimodal transportation system. This element is very important since the CTP has the potential to influence and facilitate the achievement of statewide goals pertaining to housing in addition to transportation and air quality. As stated in 2013, the Commission acknowledges this will likely require early and continuous coordination during the development of the CTP with the State Department of Housing and Community Development and other agencies and stakeholders. Commissioners, that concludes my overview of the recommended comments to Caltrans on the draft CTP. Katie Benoit, the Chief of Caltrans Division of Transportation Planning, will now provide an overview of the draft CTP 2040. At the conclusion of Ms. Benoit's presentation, staff recommends approval of the comment letter for distribution to Caltrans.
Thank you, Carrie. Katie,
Madam
welcome.
Chair. Madam Chair.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask a question.
Mr. Secretary.
Katie, I know you're going to give a presentation on the content of the plan, but before you do, can you lay out where we are in the process of this plan in terms of the adoption of this plan?
Yes. Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for this opportunity to present on the California Transportation Plan. Currently, we have completed our first draft plan. It was out for public review from March 2nd until April 17th. We currently have over 1,600 written comments, and I have also, through a broad series of webinars and public workshops, met with several hundred people over the couple of years that we've been working on this plan. So we've got a lot of comments that we're sifting through right now and responding to. We will be also working on refining our modeling and estimates. We're working with our with ARB, Air Resources Board, and our regional agencies to refine and look at our new California statewide travel demand model, which we developed as part of this planning process. So we'll be refining our modeling. We will be working very hard to refine the recommendations. We received a lot of comments about the recommendations, which of course we'll receive through your letter and comments and questions as well. So the recommendations are going to be a very key part of what we'll be working on. In August, we will have a new final draft ready to release our California Transportation Plan Policy Advisory Committee, which your CTC staff is part of that Policy Advisory Committee. We'll meet in August in a workshop format where we'll really work through and discuss a lot of the recommendations. Of course, this plan balances many priorities, and it really tries to move us forward. So there are a lot of comments and a lot of concerns about how the recommendations will come out. So we'll be working on that during the month of August, and then the final draft will be in the month of September. We'll be working with our agency as well to finalize it and move it through the final approval process, which we expect to be doing during the fall, October through December. The plan is due December 31st, and we hope to, with the help of our agency, to have it on the governor's desk well in advance of that, so that we can have it approved by the end of December, and that is our requirement under both federal and state law.
And that deadline for the due date of the plan is in statute, right? As part of
Yes, it is.
SB 391 requires?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm. Yes.
Very good. You mentioned 1,600 comments. Are you posting those on a website somewhere?
We are compiling them all into matrices, and yes, we have a website. I don't know that our huge matrix is yet on the website, but we have summarized. We know that a lot of the comments, I would say about half, are things about format and actual language, and that's very helpful. We're working through that to make it a document that reads well. But then we're receiving a number of comments, which really, the comments that you're going to be looking at in your letter reflect a lot of the comments that we're receiving. And so we're working through those right now, and we will be posting how we address all of them by August. But I'm not sure that we're going to have them on the website before August.
Okay. But on the website, you'll be responding to the comments
Yes.
in August?
Mhm.
Okay.
We've received comments through our public workshops, through our email. We have an email address where we receive comments, and then, of course, we've received many formal letters from agencies and stakeholders such as yourself. Yeah.
Thank you.
So regarding those comments, I mean, the comment period on the draft ended in April, but you're still accepting additional input or not?
We will continue to receive input in forums such as this with you. Our formal comment period did end, but we will be receiving comments like yours still over the time.
All right. Would you
Yeah.
like to make your presentation?
Thank you. The California Transportation Plan is required by federal and state law, and as Secretary Kelly mentioned, SB 391, state legislation in 2009, added a requirement for this California Transportation Plan to identify the transportation system, statewide, integrated, and multimodal, and that we needed to have a California Transportation Plan that meets the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals. Based on the Caltrans vision mission goals, our state planning priorities and strategic management plan, and the direction from SB 391 and federal direction, we have integrated all of these requirements into the California Transportation Plan. The California Transportation Plan guides investment strategies for the state. It is not a Caltrans or state highway system plan. It is a plan for all of the transportation system in California and reflects our broader goals and incorporates that into state policy specifically for transportation. It is updated every 5 years. This plan for 2040 is really cutting edge and different from previous plans because it does take into account more of the new legislation that has occurred over the last few years. We're looking at a number of very aggressive measures to meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals in the state. It's important because we have an opportunity here to understand our interregional travel, to a very statewide look, to knit together all our regional plans and local plans, and through an integrated interregional statewide look, promote balance and connectivity. of all our goals to look to the future, to incorporate new technology, changes in the fleet, in fuels, in operating the system more efficiently, and looking to the future, new mobility and new communications that will enhance how people travel and change how people interact with our transportation system. It looks very strongly to our sustainable transportation future, and this is an evolution of the plan over and above previous plans. We're looking at things like accessibility, livability, economic prosperity, safety and public health, and multimodal mobility. We, as I said, we incorporate the national goals into the California Transportation Plan. We seek to achieve policy consistency with our federal legislation and with our state legislation, which is listed here. Of course, you are familiar with AB 32 and SB 375. SB 391 that we mentioned really brings in that state piece to complement the work that the regions are doing in SB 375 and that the state is doing in all of our sectors to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and comply with AB 32. The vision that has been developed for the California Transportation Plan 2040 was developed with a very extensive stakeholder team, our Policy Advisory Committee that reflects state agencies, the regional agencies, and many other interest sectors in transportation. This is the vision that was developed for the plan. And it is, as I said, it's for the whole state integrated, multimodal, safe, globally competitive, reliable, and efficient mobility around our state. This graphic shows that the CTP 2040 seeks to meet the goals to move us through transportation strategies, policies, and strategies toward achieving the state planning priorities of economy, health, economy, environment, and equity. They have updated the language recently, and I'm used to calling those the 3 E's, prosperity, planet, and people. So this, we seek to really balance these very different goals in this plan. Also, the California Transportation Plan is an umbrella plan or a guiding light policy document that integrates our statewide modal plans. So we'll hear soon about our interregional transportation strategic plan that focuses on the state highway system and the intercity rail system. We have our recently completed freight plan, a rail plan that we're just starting to update again. Of course, high-speed rail, future transit, aviation, and bicycle pedestrian planning that we'll be updating under the overall umbrella of the policies in the California Transportation Plan. This slide simply says that we're integrating and coordinating with other statewide programs, certainly the Climate Action Plan, the high-speed rail, and the Air Resources Board scoping plan and freight plans. This sheet is a very important piece that shows the sustainability vision that we have developed, the goals, and the policies. I hope you have the bigger version there in your packet, because I know it's hard to read there. You do, good. Okay, the reason that I think this particular piece is very important is that it really elucidates the vision and the policies and puts forth policies where we as a state need to now develop the actual strategies that we want to use going forward to implement. So you'll see in our policies, you'll see this reflected: Fix It First, freight, safety and public health, tied together, protecting and enhancing the environment, multimodal transportation and accessibility and livability for people around the state, focusing on operations and technology, economic prosperity. And so this really reflects all of our state priorities and leads us to the recommendations for actual implementation strategies. This is simply the layout of the plan. The most important right now is really that Chapter 8, the recommendations. That's what we're working on and considering everyone's comments. And all the discussion that we're having in these forums is really leading us to develop a very strong recommendation chapter that we can move forward on. Performance-based planning. We've developed in the plan a series of performance measures. I think performance measures are really key to changing how we move forward. We need to articulate the goals through performance measures in our transportation system. The performance-based performance measures that we've developed for this plan reflect our smart mobility framework and the state planning priorities. They're available to look at as bundles or to be selected from to guide our transportation investments and strategies. This map is here to show you that the California statewide travel demand model, that interregional piece, which is that Caltrans has developed to add the interregional modeling and really understand interregional trips, pass-through trips, rural recreational trips, and freight. And we received this model and we're incorporating it and working with the MPOs and our fellow state agencies to look at how this is going to inform our transportation strategies going forward. It's a very innovative model, and we're working really hard to incorporate it in our planning process and with our partners.
Katie, can I, now you did that for each of the regions as well as statewide, correct?
The interregional plan, these models that we, or rather alternatives or scenarios that we modeled in the plan, Alternative 1 incorporates all of the regions, RTPs, and sustainable community strategies that were completed at the time that we did our modeling. There were a couple that weren't done yet, but it pretty much reflects all the housing and land use and priorities in the SCSs that came out of SB 375 and the regional transportation plans. And then our interregional model captures those interregional trips and complement and work together with the regional models to give us a whole picture of how transportation, how are people moving around the state, how is freight moving, and this will help us, this data, to choose investments and strategies. So this slide that looks a little complicated is actually what it illustrates is the 3 alternatives or scenarios that our Policy Advisory Committee developed in consensus to model. In other words, what if we put together these various strategies, how far will we get towards reducing that overall goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions that we are mandated to meet as a transportation sector? So Alternative 1, as I just said, incorporates what is in the sustainable community strategies that really captured that housing, land use, move to modal shift, more transit, active transportation, and compact growth, and also any projects that they have planned through their RTP project list. Also, we looked at our own statewide modal plans that I listed earlier. That includes the freight plan, and also cleaner car and truck standards that are already on being implemented. So that's really what is basically, right now in all our plans that are to be implemented. Then we chose a second alternative, which is a more aggressive alternative, and we included pricing, mode shift, much more aggressive mode shift to transit, operational efficiencies, and transportation, alternative transportation like active transportation, and some of the results of our cap and trade or greenhouse gas reduction programs that are going to come online. Thirdly, we went very aggressive and to say, okay, if we're going to meet the 2050 goals, what would we need to do? So we threw in, and we worked with ARB on this, very aggressive increases in the fuel efficiency and moving very significantly to electric vehicles and changing the fleet. So all of these alternatives or scenarios must be understood in the context that they are ways that we can look at how would we reach these greenhouse gas emission goals. Do what we have on the books right now, is that going to get us there or not? What would we need to add? And it provides some different policy bundles and levers that we can all look at, and certainly there are many different ways to bundle these, but this came from our Policy Advisory Committee, and we developed this together. Okay, this slide then tells you, gives us the results of our alternatives in this 2040 time horizon that the plan is within. Alternatives 1, 2, and 3, how far we get towards that goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And you'll see that until we get to alternative 3, we're making progress, but it's not as significant or impactful as that alternative 3. Looking at the 2050 goal, that alternative 3 does look like it moves us very, very close to that, meeting the reduction, the 80% reduction. So this is an area that we've talked a lot about, and we're going to continue to talk about it because obviously we need to really think about those strategies for meeting the goals, and how, some of these we might say, well, let's try 1 or 2 of these things, let's do them at a certain level, let's pilot them, what have you. But it gives us some idea of what kind of results we get from this bundling of strategies. And there's a lot of background to this that certainly it's on our website, and we can get into more detail if people are interested, or if you want to even discuss it further offline, where I can get my technical people to help with the discussion. Now, the recommendations we're going to group in broad-based categories and themes. Again, that's going to very much reflect everybody's comments. We're going to try to group them in short range. What could we do most immediately in the next 2 years? This will be helpful to all of us in how we move forward in implementing the plan. We'll talk about mid-range, 3 to 5 years, and long range, and which types of technology and strategy and policy changes we might expect, funding changes we might expect in each of those horizons that would affect our analysis. Finally, this is just a summary, and I've really already talked about this, about all the outreach and that we have done over the past 2 years. Finally, again, what is next? As I said, over the next few months, we'll be addressing the comments, we'll be rewriting, we'll be honing our recommendations, looking to propose what's next in our recommendations. This plan already was very innovative and moved us quite a bit forward than previous plans. But we need to be looking at now, what do we do over the next 5-year update? What new data, models, pilot projects, things we should be testing, maybe some interim studies that we need to be working on. We want to use this plan to set the stage for going forward, because we know there's a lot of change coming in transportation. So as I said, the final draft will be in August 2015. We'll hold our CTP Policy Advisory Committee workshop at that time, and then we will start moving into the approval process with our agency. That concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions or discussion on the comments, the comment letter that you have.
Thank you, Katie. Commissioners?
So, process-wise, I've personally been a lot more focused on extremely short-term in the last couple months. So to me, the 5-week period of comment wasn't very long. Maybe that's what it was written in statute. I don't think it's long enough. So I'm going to go ahead and take the time sometime between now and August to tell you what I think about it. Whether it makes any difference or not, I don't know. But, you know, just in terms of 50 years ago, just a little over 50 years ago, I went to the Seattle World's Fair. I was like, 10 years old. And I remember one of the most striking parts of it for me was the exhibit on the future of transportation. And they had a car in there, what the future car was going to look like. And I will tell you, it had absolutely no connection with the kind of cars we are driving today. It looked like a big Cadillac with fins, extra large fins put everywhere. For what purpose, I'm not sure. I don't know if it was supposed to fly sometimes or what. But the whole concept of fuel efficiency, of getting out of fossil fuels, that hadn't even, except amongst probably some science fiction writers, had not ever been conceived by anybody. So I'm really a little bit skeptical about what a 50-year plan today really means. I think, 5 years, maybe it's fine for a general outline, but to try to guide all of our policy and how we spend, I have a big problem with that. I think that we need to be looking at shorter time frames, because we can have we don't even know what the stock market's going to do tomorrow, let alone what transportation is going to be like in the next 10 years. 5 years from now, we'll have a different governor. Malcolm may or may not be still have his job. So, I'm just being blunt. This may end up being nothing more than a document sitting on a shelf someplace, because somebody, when you look at political agendas, things can change pretty quick. So all that is a long way of saying that I think we need to put this in context. When I look just at the first bullet point, reduce per capita VMT and congestion, I really wonder how you can link those two in one goal, because that would have to assume that we're never going to have any more people in California. That reduced per capita congestion, or VMT, means that we will have less congestion, but that means that, there aren't any more people around here, and I just really don't think that's going to happen. And so, and what's technology going to do to transportation, and how's that going to affect VMT? So anyway, long way of saying, yeah, I'll give you my comments. It may or may not have any impact on what you want to do with this document, but I think my biggest concern is how much does a document like this start to impact what we do fiscally with our transportation dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Art. Any other comments? Yes, Ms. Inman, then Mr. Assemi.
Katie, thank you for the presentation and all the work you all have put into this. And I echo my fellow commissioners' comments of, thinking back how I was doing my job 25 years ago. If we look at from 2015 to 2040, it's dramatically different today how we live our lives than we did just 25 years ago. So I think it's difficult. You're put in a difficult position. How long have you all been doing this type of planning, and have we looked back and seen how close we were with our previous plans?
We've been doing a California transportation plan at least back to the 1990s. We did one in 2003. When else? I'm not sure. But you know, what we see if we look back over, the California Transportation Plan is a policy plan. It doesn't incorporate projects, but it gives us some policy guidance and a vision that we agree we're all working towards to the future, that then we can each take to our respective modal areas or sectors or regions and use to just evaluate. It's an evaluation of various investments and strategies. And if we're all, I think what this is different in this plan is really that it developed that consensus vision, that it's incorporating very new priorities for the state, the aggressive reducing greenhouse gas emissions and changing our fuels, and it's also bringing in new interregional modeling and data that we didn't have in the past. So I think this plan, it's in the same vein of past plans, but I think it has definitely advanced our practice in modeling data, consensus building, engagement, and in trying to balance the many competing, which you point out, the VMT and congestion, you know, just to balance these kinds of issues. And it's given us a forum to hopefully set in place more discussion on this over the next, from this time we finish this plan into the next plan.
Well, we heard at our public forum yesterday very loudly from this region that one size fits all just simply doesn't work, even within their region itself or for us as a state. So I think we need to make sure that we do allow for the flexibility. Going to the modeling, in terms of the assumptions, I know Doug Ito is going to give us a presentation on the Air Resources Board, but are we all using the same kind of assumptions with the modeling to make sure our forecast, I know there's, we're waiting for a port forecast to be updated because we missed by some 40% from where we thought we would be today when we did that forecast in 2006. So that's a significant variance. So are we all, and I don't know, Doug, maybe you can address this later, are we all using the same kind of assumptions and agreeing on our population? You know, we talk about the economy here, but there's not much there when we talk about how many jobs we're going to create and those kind of details, because clearly we have an aging population. We're told that we have workforce issues coming through. Clearly housing is a hot topic in terms of how we get that. So I just think there's lots of assumptions. Let's make sure that we're all, at least if we're not using the assumptions, that we're clear that we aren't. In terms of the freight modeling, we have lots of private sector investments that help us operate on the system of systems, and it's difficult. I don't see that coming through. We talk about our Class 1 railroads and our ports, but the private sector investments are huge and kind of really have some impact on how our transportation, at least on the freight mobility. I think also the technology and the shared economy, it's a very hot focus on the future conference every year. We all get excited about hearing all the new technology, and it's just lightning speed that these changes are coming. So I'm not sure how you all can address the impacts of Lyft or Uber or any of the shared economy, and now that's moving into Uber Freight with Cargomatic and some of those other solutions. So I think the technology is going to give you a wider variance in terms of how close our vision is for 2050. And I have a simple change for you on page 8. I think your next freight update on the California Freight Mobility Plan was it a 5-year update, Bruce, that the Lowenthal bill required? So that would be 2019.
Okay, thank you. On the modeling and assumptions, with our interregional transportation, with our interregional model, the California Statewide Travel Demand Model, and the Air Resources Board vision model, and the region's various models that they use. It's true that assumptions are not always exactly the same, and data sources and timing and so on. But we do have a technical advisory committee and a statewide modeling advisory committee that's looking at that as we go forward, and our own consultant doing the modeling for this plan is right now, we're producing with our staff out of our model trip tables, which the regions are able to look at, and how does this, and we're going through a discussion of how does this match with their models and their conclusions. So it's not going to be perfect, but we think at least if we're working together and being transparent and trying to come to similar assumptions, then that will be moving the modeling forward, and it's certainly a goal. As far as one size doesn't fit all, we hope that in our vision, goals, and policies, we're laying that groundwork for flexibility. And it's not prescriptive plan. There aren't projects in this plan. It is policy and vision. And in terms of freight, the freight mobility plan really encompasses a lot of this. This is a broader policy, but we are receiving comments to that effect, and we'll be looking at that if we can strengthen our discussion of freight in this plan. And finally, you mentioned the future, and that is a challenge, because how do we model that? How is that going to change? How are automated vehicles and connected vehicles going to change our infrastructure? How will electric vehicles change our infrastructure? And in the plan, in the recommendations, that's one thing we want to talk about, is what are some of our future looks that we need to incorporate as we finish this plan and move into, we want to leave placeholders for that discussion. And we also, as a planning community, we are talking with Uber and Lyft and other such future mobility, sharing economy type of applications, and just as a planning community trying to learn and talk about how that will change our system going forward.
Thank you. Commissioner Assemi, and then Secretary Kelly.
Secretary, do you want to go first?
No, please, go ahead.
Katie, thank you for the presentation, and Carrie as well. I want to echo Commissioner Arp's comments about short-term and long-term planning. Although we do need long-term planning to figure out which direction we're going, it's very difficult to forecast the future and how people would live, work, and play. And technology is playing such a bigger role in our daily lives. 5 years ago, we had no clue that Amazon would be dropping off our goods and services via drone to our doorsteps. And what Elon Musk is looking at, his Hyperloop, whether it's going to become a reality or not, he certainly has an interesting concept in transporting goods and people across the state. I want one great comment on Chapter 6 on your performance measures. One of the key performance measures you're studying is congestion effects on productivity, which I believe is huge, especially in the Bay Area and Southern California. And I'm glad to see that one of the key performance measures. In terms of the comment period, the public comment period has ended. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there any opportunity to extend that? I saw there was several forums throughout the state. Is there any opportunity to extend that, or how does Caltrans? Did Caltrans receive good feedback from all the regions?
Maybe I can also ask Katie to elaborate on when the next draft comes out, and the outreach that we'll do in August will be another opportunity, another round of public input, and I'm looking to Katie to describe that in greater detail, because I do think that there needs to be another round of engagement, and I think it should be at the timing of the next draft.
I mean, this is an important document that we need to give it a lot of attention. I want to take a lot of time going through it, and I would encourage more a good public debate.
Yes, thank you, and we really appreciate the recognition of the importance of this plan and your interest in delving into it further and giving us more comments. We will be, as Malcolm said, we'll be in the month of August discussing this with our CTP Policy Advisory Committee. Your CTC staff is a member of that, so that's one venue for bringing us comments. Certainly, we're open to discussion and comment whenever you complete reading the plan and you're ready to provide that to us. The public engagement process, we've really done it over the past 2 years. We feel it's been quite extensive and positive overall and given us really good feedback. We do not plan to open a new public comment period. However, one thing I would recommend is we have a really excellent summary report of all our public workshops and forums and webinars and outreach, which we posted on our CTP website, which really kind of captures and groups the type of comments. It actually lists all the stakeholder and community groups and public who came to each of our workshops around the state. So I know that we have our CTP website here, and under that is that public engagement summary, which is a really good document. Now, that doesn't cover all the written comments, because that's what we're working on right now.
And the point I wanted to add is yesterday's forum got a lot of attention here locally.
Yeah.
And my guess is over the next few days, especially with tomorrow's Technical Advisory Committee on road charge, there's going to be lots of buzz about transportation, future of transportation and transportation funding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that has the real ability to continue to influence our recommendations and how we write those and what we set in place for moving forward on the next plan once this one is completed, because this is a continuous planning process, and it won't just stop when the plan gets submitted. We'll continue to work on it.
Madam Chair, we have a statutory deadline at the end of December that we have to meet, but throughout August, there'll be stakeholder involvement in and input into the next edition. I will work with staff to review the viability of another short comment period after that next draft gets released. It will be a huge challenge with the December deadline, but I think that we need to look hard at providing that public comment another round.
Thank you. Secretary Kelly? Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments. First, Katie, I want to thank you and the department for the immense amount of work and the countless hours you put into the document thus far. I also want to thank the Commission for their thoughtful letter submitted to the report. I asked Katie at the beginning to sort of lay out where we are in the process, because I wanted to note that we're in the process of developing a final plan, and it's not there yet. But it's part of the process. So the input from the Commission is important. Katie, you mentioned in your presentation, I think in the answer to one of the questions, that the Commission has done the California Transportation Plan before. There's been other iterations, but one of the key differences in this one seems to me is that this one in particular, unlike the prior ones, is guided by law, state law that required specific things to be analyzed and articulated in the plan. So that's a major difference between what we had before and what this plan has to accomplish. Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay. So, 391, the legislation that required this called for specifically a maximum feasible reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and how we would get there. So the plan has to speak to that issue. One of, I guess, my observations, having reviewed the plan, at least in the draft form we have it in now, is I think there's a want, and you hear some of it from the Commission. I know at the agency I have this want. There's an opportunity to express how we will deliver a transportation system going forward in the era of climate change.
Yeah.
And that is what I would love to see this plan become. But it's hard, and it's particularly hard when the statute didn't necessarily require that. So I'm just flagging that we have a law we're following in producing the plan. We have a need to articulate how we build a transportation system that meets our climate objectives, meets our mobility objectives, meets our safety objectives, and respects human and geographic diversity in California. So again, we did hear yesterday a lot about one size does not fit all, and we do need to, in any expression of a plan, respect the diversity. So, but that law also requires this plan to land on the governor's desk. And I'll just say from my part, I do want to see it become more of that expression of how we get to a transportation system in this particular era, which has really acute challenges, and while meeting as much as we have to meet under the statute. So it's a very tough challenge. I know you guys spend a lot of time on this, and certainly my agency's engagement will be increased in the weeks ahead, because I do want to see this become an expression of how we can deliver a system that works in climate, in the world of climate change. So.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. In fact, you're mirroring some of my thoughts and my own comments on this plan. Is we have to continually remind ourselves that the governor's executive order is the law of the land, that we're required to meet these extraordinary greenhouse gas reduction challenges. So that is the top line fact that continues in my brain. On the other hand, I will share with you how, with great respect, I'm disappointed in the presentation, because this is a PR presentation that doesn't really get into the fact that there's a new world order that we need to start teaching our people about and our public about in order to achieve the law of the land. I mean, your bar chart is very revealing to me. Absent doing some of the incredible recommendations that are in this that folks are not aware about as part of this plan, we're not going to meet the law, the governor's order. And I think it's totally unfair to not showcase those. You've got a very short comment time. I appreciate that agency and Caltrans knows that they've got to kind of do some tweaking. It's going to be really tough, no matter what you guys do, to meet the law. And then on top of everything, you know, an aspirational plan such as this, at the end of the day, it still has to be reflected in the regional transportation plans. And they are now going to be required to plan to 2050 standards. So again, one of the things that's clearly missing here is, without some form of CEQA modernization, the only thing I can guarantee is we're all going to be in court at every time of the day on all of these plans under CEQA, because it's going to be so tough to achieve on the ground with the vision that the state is establishing, remembering that we've got some very tough goals. So I don't know who your consensus group was, but I just am disappointed that there wasn't, I mean, 1,600 comments, clearly there was robust response. I would have loved to see you talk about what are your challenges in this presentation. The things that you already see. You've got such a short window, we've got to get this done by December. What should we be warning folks about now when all of these RTPs are coming up for cycling and they have to plan to this? So anyway, this is going to be very tough for us. And I would love to be able to be an advocate and not cynical and go, oh my God, there's no way. But we've got to comply with this law. Anyway, just my thoughts. Thank you. Any other comments? Questions? Tough stuff. Okay. Thank you very, very much. Katie?
Thank you.
Oh, yes?
Yes,
Carrie?
sorry. We do
Sorry.
have, this is an action item.
It's an action item for our letter, yes.
And
So-
also, I just want to point out, we will bring this back in August when we do have the next
Great.
draft, final draft, or however they're positioning it, but we will bring it back for your consideration.
Move
Thank-
approval.
A motion from Mr.
Second.
Gelmetti, a
Second.
second from Mr. Arp. Any other questions, comments?
Comments, Carrie, thank you for your comments, your comment letter going from the chair. And I'm glad to see the land use and housing comments added on there. Thank you.
That's great. Questions, comments on the phone? We've got a motion to support. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Mr. Tavaloni, Mr. Gilmetti? I mean Gordino.
I think you meant Gordino, but we Italians all look alike.
Especially on the phone.
You're the good-looking one, Joe.
Okay, I've got a unanimous support. Thank you very much, Carrie and Katie, for your hard work on this. And item number 17 is done. We're on to item 18, comment on the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan. Laurel.
Yes, Commissioners, this is also an action item to approve transmittal of Commission comments in response to the draft 2015 Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan. You have a pink item with the proposed letter attached. The Department is required to prepare and submit the ITSP to the Commission for approval by June 30th, 2015. This is required per SB 486. The ITSP is to be directed at achieving a high-functioning and balanced interregional transportation system, as well as informed development of the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program, the ITIP. Staff has reviewed the draft provided by the Department and has prepared the attached comment letter that you have. Basically, we have kind of boiled it down to two comments on this letter. The first comment where the Commission recommends that connections to major seaports and commercial airports be included within the priority corridors. And the second comment is that the Commission would recommend that the ITSP clearly identify the methodology for selecting projects for inclusion in the ITIP. It doesn't really address how a project that is not on a priority corridor might be selected, so that is our second recommendation. And Katie is making this presentation also.
Okay, thank you, Laurel. What is the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan, or ITSP? The ITSP provides guidance for the identification and prioritization of interregional transportation improvements and implementing Caltrans' new goals and the governor's sustainability goals, all the same goals that we just talked about really in the CTP 2040, but more focused on this particular mode of the state highway system and the intercity rail system. The ITSP, in this iteration, again, we've gone beyond what we had done in the past to really look at corridors, that major corridors that move people and goods throughout the state, and to look at them in a multimodal, multi-jurisdictional fashion so that it guides investment in the ITIP, but also for other investment on these corridors. I forgot. I give you the next slide. This is one example of the 11 interregional corridors that we've identified in the ITSP that are the primary corridors for interregional travel in the state. This example shows the San Jose, San Francisco Bay Area, the Central Valley, and the Los Angeles corridor as one corridor that is that links regions and is a very important freight corridor. Many Tier 1 freight facilities that came out of our California Freight Mobility Plan lie in this corridor. The way that we selected our 11 interregional corridors was really looking at freight movement, truck volumes, and also access. So in other words, across the north part of the state. This map highlights this one corridor. Just to give you an example, in this corridor, we found that interregional travel occurs between the endpoints, the Bay Area and the Sacramento in the north, and Los Angeles region in the south, with destinations in between, including Stockton, Fresno, and Bakersfield. This corridor supports the agricultural industry in the Central Valley and as such is very important. This corridor has multi-priority interregional facilities that we looked at, including I-580, Interstate 5, State Route 99, the San Joaquin Intercity Rail Corridor, and future high-speed rail. Again, that was in keeping with taking a more multimodal corridor look in this interregional transportation strategic plan. This is the way that we are trying to attempt to analyze major segments of these interregional corridors. And this is an example again from the corridor that we're looking at right now, State Route 99. This takes what this shows, and this is an analytical framework that we're trying to develop through this ITSP that will help us look at where to focus investments on potential bottlenecks and so on in the systems. So that tan bar across the bottom shows you the truck travel, and the green across through the middle, the car travel, and then the dotted line there shows you what the percentage of trucks is in each segment on 99. And that top red line is showing you the lanes, where we go for 6 lanes to 4 lanes to 6 lanes and so on. So it helps us identify where the traffic is mainly local and commute travel, which is not what the ITSP is focused on or the ITIP is focused on, but where that freight volume and those bottlenecks are incurring that may benefit from investment and prioritization in the interregional planning and in the ITIP. We also took a look in these multimodal corridors at the San Joaquin, for example, the intercity rail corridors. They're part of the ITIP and the ITSP. This is showing you the San Joaquin intercity rail ridership, which has increased so greatly since 1998. And it's one goal is to develop system improvements in the intercity rail that can lead to an increase in intercity rail ridership and mobility through the corridor. And we look at how that interacts through the corridors with the other modes. This chart shows you the types of investment that we have made in the this same corridor since 1998, and it's just an overview of how of the different sources of funding. A lot of it comes from our shop, a lot of it is local dollars, and of course STIP, ITIP, and bond funding. And the point of looking at this and of looking at our corridors in a very multimodal way is to develop a framework along our corridors for how we could partner together. The ITIP doesn't fund everything. It's not everything is not eligible for ITIP funding that needs to occur in these corridors to really improve mobility and accessibility through them. So we want to look at all the modes, and we want to look at all the possibilities where we could partner for funding in these modes, in these corridors. Now, the ITSP and the ITIP are connected because the ITSP provides some planning and analysis and data that helps us look at what are the projects of greatest interregional merit and need and priority for investment. This is information that then can be used in the ITIP to look at investment priorities. There are transportation projects that are not necessarily on a priority corridor. That was mentioned and will be mentioned in your comment letter. And certainly, though, that by looking at the multimodal corridor and all of those priorities and other priorities from other regions can be looked at, and certainly advocates and regions can certainly bring those to our attention and talk about what has the greatest interregional merit to be funded in the ITIP. So again, the ITIP and the multimodal corridor look gives us a platform and data and to actually analyze what are the priorities. The investments in the intercity rail corridors and freight, closing gaps for freight and closing capacity gaps, looking at conversion to freeways, expressways, safety improvements, and again, freight movement. All of these are possibilities for looking at how we prioritize investments, and the ITSP brings that kind of information forward to you for the ITIP. This is our our ITSP schedule. Our ITSP right now is out for public review. The comment period closes June 8th. We will submit the final ITSP to the CTC by June 30th. This is our statutory requirement. And so we will have a very quick window there to incorporate all our comments and update the plan and work with our agency to provide it to you by June 30th. This will meet our statutory requirement from Senate Bill 486, and it then provides you the opportunity over the summer months until you meet in August to consider the plan and to approve it and hopefully approve it in your August meeting. Then it will be lined up and ready to inform the 2016 ITIP process. This is our contact information. We take comments on the web. Of course, we're going to receive a formal comment letter from you, and we will be working with during our revision period with your staff to look at incorporating those comments. It was mentioned connections to major seaports and airports. We're looking at our mapping and making those connections in the plan already, so that you'll see that when you see the final product. And we will clarify further methodologies for doing this multimodal analysis on corridors and for the types of strategies that we might partner with on the interregional corridors. So that concludes my presentation and overview, and so I welcome any comments or questions.
Thank you, Katie. Questions? Yes, Mr. Sen.
I had a question, Katie, on your Route 99 service profile. It shows, San Jose, San Francisco Bay Area, I-5 having the biggest percentage of truck travel. Is there is it state law that limits trucks to 55 miles per hour, or is it national? It's not. Vince, it's state. Mm-hmm. Is there a reason why we were at 55?
On I-5, I don't know. That would be our vehicle code, but I really don't know that it's 55 for trucks on I-5. Yeah.
It's 55 everywhere in California, but it's not a federal mandate.
Oh, no.
So
no.
Is there a reason it should be at 55? It can't go up to. On I-5, it's 2-lane, and when trucks are passing, everybody's speed drops down to 55 from 70. And is there an opportunity to take a look at that?
Well, yeah, you've got to study, I mean, you've got to do a traffic study as well as a safety study would be all folded into the same thing to set speed limits. You've got to look at some of the accident data as well as the prevailing speed of the entire traffic. I mean, you've got to do a study to evaluate the appropriate speed limit setting for cars and trucks.
Because other states don't have that limit.
Other states have higher speed limits for autos, too. And we've got to evaluate the density of our state in certain areas versus the density of other states. But, I mean, you've got to do a traffic study and make a proposal, and CHP and others would be involved in that proposal.
I'm just looking at I-5 corridor, the highest percentage of truck travel is there, and when trucks pass, it just slows down commuter traffic substantially.
Which chart are you looking at that shows you?
I'm looking at this one right here. With I-5, the Grapevine, I-5 Grapevine having the...
The chart is just for Highway
Yes.
99.
So keep in mind, down at the south end where that is, that's the combination of both 99 and I-5 traffic. Once I-5 and 99 split, I think you'll see a different picture as far as the truck volumes on 99 versus I-5. But down near the Grapevine, when the two routes basically combine, you have a different volume.
But generally on I-5, just going through the valley, every time a truck passes, and it's, I mean, when you have two lanes and a truck passes, everybody slows down substantially.
One of the things that we are doing with this multimodal corridor analysis is broadening our look. In the prior ITSP, we looked at 99 as a focus route. So this is an opportunity that we might be able to look at that, and we have funded through our federal transportation planning funding a study valley-wide, the Valley 8 MPOs, to look at freight movement through the valley. It's just getting started, and I think it's going to be about a 2-year study. So there, we could look at the scope there and see if, you know, there's a
Maybe
possibility
just check with
to
the
look
freight
at that.
industry if they would support that, or...
Yeah, and through our California Freight Mobility Advisory Committee, we do talk with the freight community, so that should be an issue we can bring up there as well.
Yes, Fran?
What about seasonality? How do these average daily traffic counts recognize the fluctuation with seasonality? Because clearly, we're trying to protect our ag industry when we look at our water crisis, but if we can't get those goods to market, and I'm guessing that if we go to an average, that's like having 2.3 children. No one really can do that. So how do we accommodate the intense seasonality demands that occur? And if I look at this chart, if I'm looking at 99 where we go 4-lane, 6-lane, 4-lane, 6-lane, every time you make that transition, it's more difficult if you have heavy truck volumes because we don't integrate that effectively from 6 lanes to 4 on a passenger vehicle basis, but it's really complicated when we have some of the larger vehicles. So how do we recognize those in our planning factors?
If I could please address that, Bruce DeTerra with Caltrans. For the second question, part of the reason we selected this corridor, besides being here in Fresno, was to illustrate exactly what you discussed as being a priority then for the ITIP, is to look at where we have these kinds of issues. And as you can see, there are multiple ones. So given the funding that we have available to us with ITIP and how much money it can bring to the table, how would we go about determining which of these 4-lane segments would be the priority to fund when? So that process is what we're going to be working on going forward. And I'm sorry, the first part of your question I had.
Seasonality.
Oh, the seasonality.
Yeah.
We do have the data that we can look at seasonality. Typically, we'll pick we'll take the 20th busiest day because we don't pick those very, very peak days because they could be unusual for certain reasons. So we can show the highest, let's say 340th day to look at seasonality and work backwards and say we could look at the top 30 below that to get an idea of that peak agricultural processing season. In our letter to the federal government for the Freight Mobility Plan, we asked that they consider seasonality, particularly for agricultural movement within the state. We haven't yet received a response, but we do know that Vince Milano is working on that as I speak.
And Bruce, since you're speaking to us, you and I had talked earlier about some of the concerns about connecting to the port, and you assured me that maybe there's more detailed maps that might end up in here to give some comfort to the connectivity.
And magically, the map, the item that precedes this, slide 3, if we go back to that, includes all the deep water seaports that intersect with that corridor, and it also includes the major air cargo airports. So we have the ports of West Sacramento, Stockton, Benicia, which is a privately owned port, Richmond, Oakland, San Francisco, and Redwood City, all reflected on that map as indicating that. And then also the airports at Oakland, Sacramento, Mather, it doesn't show up, it should. Fresno is also part of this as one of our 12 air cargo airports.
Okay.
And I assume that the shield or the urban boundary thing obliterated it, and it's underneath that.
Well, I was hoping that life existed beyond, beneath Ventura, that there were more interregional opportunities
and in the
south of Ventura.
Well, this is one of 11 corridors. This is just used as an example.
As an example.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have a coastal corridor that goes roughly from Port Hueneme, and we do include that within that corridor to the Port of San Diego and San Ysidro and Otay Mesa, so that we show that along the coast.
Okay. This map seems to demonstrate that the 11 strategic interregional corridors are right here.
Yes.
And that's, it's a bad map.
That is our information conveyance problem.
Yes,
the actual 3, 4, and 5 go
Let me
together.
help you.
Yes.
Well, we all know the OC is on a different planet.
Thank you.
I don't know why you needed to have it on that map.
Occasionally, it's all about us. Well, I was trying to protect San Diego, and L.A. is not on this map either, just saying.
And actually, we can ask staff to briefly list the 11 corridors by brief description if you'd like.
No, that's quite all right.
I mean, you've got the 80 corridor, you've
Yeah.
got the LA Eastern corridor, easterly, you've got the Central Coast, you've got the North Coast, you've got the I-5 up to the North States, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there are 11 main corridors. This highlights one of them and the level of detail that went into each of the corridor analyses.
Right.
I got it. Garth Hopkins.
No, it's quite all right. It's, the point's
have
been
the
made.
maps
We
in the
get
plan.
it.
It's on page 54 of your draft document.
Thank
The
you.
11 corridors are listed.
Thank
And
you.
about the dredging of Newport Bay for the new container terminal, well, let Katie address that.
Oh.
Any other comments? One item I wanted to ask about is another one. You've also received a lot of comments on this plan. Will you be posting those on the website so that others can take a look at
Yes.
at that? I think it would be
Yes.
helpful
Yeah.
for folks to see. And then, again, I mean, I appreciate Commissioner Hart making fun of Orange County being on another planet. But there are two major, one of the things that's so interesting in California, as you know, is the lack of east-west connectors.
Yeah.
And in particular, when you have two major metropolitan areas, hard to believe, but they are, in the Inland Empire and Orange County. The 91 is completely a mess, trying to do the best we can, right? But the SR 74 is the other east-west connector, and I'm just sharing with Caltrans, and I would ask my commissioners if you would allow me to amend our comment letter to include it as an east-west connector. There's no inner-city rail, which I know you guys are all focused on. It's important. I got population growth projected to be 30% there. It's going to be a major impact. It also has some recreational value, obviously with some major issues, Cleveland National Forest, et cetera, there. But if commissioners would allow me to amend our letter to include SR 74 to take a look at as an interregional corridor, particularly because of the growth in that area, I would be grateful.
Okay.
And so, those are my only comments. Any other comments? We have a letter that we need your vote on, and I'm asking for an amendment to the letter to include SR 74 in addition to ports of LA Long Beach that are there. Oh, and we do have a speaker card, yes, thank you. Ariana Zerneden. Ariana, would you speak to our item 18? And we have 3 minutes for you.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Chair Dunn and members of the California Transportation Commission, Director Doherty and Secretary Kelly. My name is Ariana Zerneden with the San Diego Association of Governments, and we appreciate the opportunity to comment on the draft ITSP. The ITSP serves as an important tool in identifying key transportation facilities that serve the economic and mobility needs of our state. As stated in the executive summary of the draft ITSP, the California Interregional Transportation System connects regions not only to each other but also to neighboring states and to Mexico. San Diego County connects directly to Mexico with 3 existing ports of entry, and another land port is planned to facilitate the growing movement of people and goods between the 2 countries. The I-5 corridor in San Diego County provides the direct connection from Mexico to Orange County, the Los Angeles Basin, and beyond. However, the draft ITSP fails to include the I-5 corridor in the San Diego region as a priority interregional highway. Without this stretch of the I-5, southern portions of the state would not connect to the most populous and economically productive areas such as the Los Angeles Basin and the San Francisco Bay Area. Given such importance to the state, it is unclear why the I-5 corridor has not been identified as a priority interregional highway. Prior to the release of the draft document and during its development stage, SANDAG staff consistently stressed the importance of including the I-5 corridor as a priority highway in the ITSP. Similarly, the California Transportation Commission, in its initial comments to the state, specifically requested that the I-5 corridor be included in the ITSP as a priority corridor. However, the draft falls short on that premise. SANDAG respectfully requests that Caltrans reconsider this exclusion and include the I-5 corridor as a priority interregional highway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam
Mel?
Chair, the intent is to include the I-5 corridor. I would not dispute any of the comments the speaker made. I will go back and with staff make sure that the document is very clear on that respect. Obviously, the I-5 corridor between San Diego and the LA Basin is a very important corridor. If it's not clear that that is part of that, we will make sure that it is. But the intent is for it to be identified as one of the priority corridors.
Very good, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so it looks like we have our letter of May 28, and we might have one more amendment that's being requested here.
Pardon, could I ask for a clarification on the adding the 74, whether you had limits of connecting I-5 to Interstate 15, if that's the section, or if it's the entirety of 74 from one terminus to the other?
The entirety of the 74.
The entirety of the 74.
Ortega Highway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like there's another amendment in paragraph 123, where we talk second line connections to major seaports and land ports. Seaports, comma, land ports and commercial airports be included in the priority corridors. Okay.
Do we need to call out the I-5? I know Malcolm has just reassured us that it's in, but would it be appropriate for us to include it in our letter?
Have at it, I'm sure.
Happy to do it. Great. Okay. So with those amendments proposed, is there a motion to accept our letter? Ms. Inman, second by Asimi. Questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Mr. Guardino, Mr. Tavaloni? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, motion carries. Any other items on here? Nothing, so we move on to item number 19, overview of the Air Resources Board Sustainable Freight Strategy. Carrie.
I promise to be brief. Commissioners, agenda item 19 is a pink and is an action item. In an effort to assist in guiding the development of the sustainable freight strategy. Staff has prepared the comments that you have in your pink item to this discussion draft for the Commission's consideration. In summary, the staff are recommending the following 3 comments. First, to be consistent with the Commission's comments on the California Freight Mobility Plan issued in December 2014, we recommend 1 statewide freight plan integrating statewide transportational modal plans with agreed-upon statewide priorities. Second, a balance between the environment and economy needs to be struck. Economic sustainability for goods movement industry must be co-equal consideration in the development and the use of a sustainable freight strategy. We are encouraging ARB to commission an independent economic analysis to provide additional assurance the impacts of measures, projections, and other assumptions planned are peer-reviewed and supported. And finally, to achieve compliance with the government regulations, new rules and requirements must be achievable, transparently communicated, and fully understood by those charged with implementation. Commissioners, that concludes my overview of the recommended comments to ARB. Doug Ito, Chief of Freight Transportation Branch of California Air Resources Board, will be providing an overview of the Sustainable Freight Discussion Draft. At the conclusion of Mr. Ito's presentation, staff recommends the approval of the comment letter for distribution to ARB.
Thank you, Carrie. Welcome, Doug Ito.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Dunn and Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to come back before you to present some progress that we've made on the sustainable freight discussion throughout the state. If you recall, we've kind of initiated the discussion a few years ago. We had some very broad-based discussion at a Hagen-Smith event that we had a couple of years ago. And then over the last year, many stakeholder discussions, both with agency staff as well as stakeholders across the state about what our future freight system might look like. And so today I'm here to present a milestone in that discussion. We also made a commitment to not show up without Caltrans. And so Bruce is going to be standing in for the work that we've been doing coordinating with the transportation side of things. In 2014, we had a lot of discussions about the freight system. We learned a lot about the complexity. We also heard a lot of comments about how is it that we're integrating what we're doing at the Air Resources Board with transportation infrastructure, energy provision, particularly as we look at the different fuel pathways that we have before us, and then also the economic development component. And we were encouraged to continue to integrate and have more conversations about how do we approach a statewide set of priorities that accommodate all of those perspectives. We also were out there asking folks, what are some ideas that you have for how to improve the freight system? And one of the main questions we got back is, well, ARB, what are your ideas? And we didn't want to seed the discussion too early, but we did recognize that there needed to be something for the stakeholder groups to react to. So at the end of last year and through the beginning of this year, we set forth on a work effort to identify those areas that ARB has authority over, that we have levers both in terms of our regulatory authority as well as our incentive programs, to be able to feed into, what is the potential in the freight system. We also undertook a separate effort within the board to develop a technology assessment, which provided us with a foundation of where technology stands today and where some of the advanced technology is going. So the document that I'm presenting before you today is a discussion draft which identifies 3 main objectives, which I'll get into in the next slide. But it is in response to a lot of the discussions and feedback we had over the course of last year. 2 of the main objectives of this document were to highlight what we're calling immediate actions as well as near-term ARB measures that address the concerns and the opportunities within the freight sector to address health risk and reduce criteria and greenhouse gas pollutants. The immediate actions that we identified in the document relate to enforcement of our existing regulations within and with a focus on freight sources, as well as highlighting the incentive opportunities that we've been providing and continue to provide through our programs such as Carl Moyer, the Proposition 1B incentive program, and then now as the cap and trade proceeds programs ramp up, those funding that have been made available to the freight sector there. There are also near-term ARB measures that we identify within the document that are specific to sectors that we believe we can begin acting on today that represent some immediate actions. So we have a few on trucks related to ocean-going vessels, locomotives, and one item that I'll talk a little bit more later on is a data collection effort, recognizing that in the freight sector, the data availability to understand both the activity and the impact of equipment is something that we'd like to understand a lot more. And so our data collection is intended to provide more information about how the freight system works and where our opportunities either for regulation or for efficiency improvements might lie. We also outline in the document what we're calling a vision and for the future of freight, as well as some broad-based approaches that have caught a lot of attention and discussion over the course of the last couple of months. We're identifying the recognition that the transportation sector generally, but freight specifically, is headed towards an opportunity to get lower and lower emissions through the use of technology and efficiencies. So we're looking at those integrated concepts of how does land use and transportation infrastructure play into achieving these objectives, as well as the potential for a facility-based approach, which we're characterizing as a facility-based cap, and I know that there's a lot of interest about that. I'll spend a little bit of time on that one right now. The discussion in the document on the facility-based cap is really the recognition that there is a concept that says if you have a freight hub, whether it be a port or a distribution center complex, there are many pieces of equipment operating, and there's many different owners of that equipment. And so in order to reduce emissions, you could take the approach of saying each specific piece of equipment needs to meet some sort of standard, or you could say as a whole, our objective for this particular type of facility is to reduce emissions by a certain amount. We're interested in exploring that facility-based approach, in part because it provides flexibility for the equipment operators within that facility to decide how best to approach the emission reductions. Huge complication, huge complex question, and so we understand that. The discussion in the document provides some perspective about different approaches that we're looking at. As we move forward, we are interested in feedback from both the stakeholders and the industry involved in these types of facilities to provide some idea of what kinds of opportunities might be available. We also highlight the opportunities for system efficiency. So this is an area that we are not typically, we don't have authority at the Air Resources Board to regulate or incentivize efficiency directly. But we do recognize that within the freight system and the systems of systems that exist within freight, that moving goods faster, cleaner, more efficiently, both from a cost perspective as well as a pollutant perspective, is something that could provide a lot of benefit without the need for regulation or additional incentive. So the point that was made earlier about really looking at the technology implications, not just on the engine side, but information technology. There's a lot of discussion about 3D printing and the opportunities for manufacturing to come back into California from that perspective without having to move goods very far in terms of the distances involved. So we are interested in that discussion, and part of what we're doing here is seeding that discussion moving forward so that not only do we look at the engines and equipment side of it, but we're looking at the opportunities on the efficiency side. And that is where this document serves as a launching point for the continued discussion of the sustainable freight strategy. ARB has been leading this discussion, but I think it's a misnomer to say that it's ARB strategy. We have now involved and are continuing to coordinate with CalSTA, Caltrans, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, as well as the Energy Commission, to really provide a California perspective on where the freight system goes. And, you know, one of our objectives, and the reason I'm here today, is to ensure that transportation stakeholders are aware of what we're doing and involved in the discussion as we move forward. I saw Katie's presentation. She had a slide with a bunch of covers on it. We have one as well. I think the point is that, you know, the state is beginning to recognize that while we have a bunch of planning exercises and documents, the strategies that are involved, the actions that come out of those documents cross over, and there is a necessity for us to be talking across agencies and across these documents to ensure that as we set priorities, we are sharing those priorities with similar types of efforts with other agencies. This slide outlines a bit of the process that we're going through this year. We're continuing the discussion across the state. We're already beginning to schedule meetings, some of which involve the transportation stakeholders in this room. We are utilizing, and Caltrans continues to facilitate, the Freight Advisory Committee as one way of information dissemination and discussion on the work effort to develop a California sustainable freight strategy. And then we'll also be looking at specific outreach or work sessions as appropriate as we hit some of the different milestones. So we recognize that every single stakeholder in the freight system can't be involved in all of the discussions, and so we're trying to be strategic about targeting those groups of folks that where they meet, and, you know, what opportunities we have to come to you to be able to have that discussion. We also heard a lot about the economic component, which is reflected in your comment letter. At the Air Resources Board, we've actually hired an economic advisor that will be advising not just on freight economic efforts, but our economic efforts board-wide. So that is one area of recognition that economy is an important part of what we do. We're also looking at a couple of contracting opportunities to involve economic analysis, both on the work that's happening this year, as well as our long-term needs, in order to improve the economic models and perspectives that relate to the freight system. We're working with Caltrans and their research and other opportunities that they have to engage on the economic side. We're looking to have a plan that's completed in the mid-2016 timeframe. Clearly, there's going to be a lot of discussions between now and the end of the year as we develop and begin to put out there the ideas that are taking shape with respect to this joint set of priorities. Specific elements that we are intending to include are broader objectives. So what is a sustainable freight strategy? We've had that question come up, and we've focused in on it being a near zero emission freight system that really pays attention to the economic, infrastructure, and environmental priorities. But we also want to be able to provide more specific objectives that are coordinated with each one of the agencies. We want to identify specific actions, so not just a planning document, but those things, actions, policies that each one of the agencies and other stakeholders can begin moving forward in the near term. So recognizing there's a long-term objective, what are some very practical steps that we can begin taking, and where there are opportunities, are there pilot projects that can demonstrate the coordination of many different state agencies focusing in and prioritizing a particular effort in a geographic or a sector within the freight system. And then, of course, working with our agency partners. This slide really is the ask for the Transportation Commission. Many times over the course of the discussion, we've had folks come to us and say, you know, great, we like the idea, we want to participate, tell me what you want from us, tell us what you want out of our agency or our effort. One of the responses that I have to that is, you know, I'm very pleased for the interest, I'm very pleased for the engagement. What are your priorities for freight? as we move forward. We've got infrastructure, you have a high degree of influence over funding, but it would be helpful for us and Caltrans and Economic Development and Energy Commission to be able to receive input about the specific ideas and priorities that you have that relate to freight. Are there criteria that you've been thinking about or your staff have been thinking about that would be particularly insightful as we move forward? Are there particular corridors or are there particular types of projects that you think are going to be most effective in helping you move the transportation system forward from the CTC perspective? And so what we've got here on this slide is a couple of broader questions, but really it gets down to identifying priorities that are actionable. That concludes my presentation. I hope to be able to take advantage of future CTC meetings to provide you additional updates. I've been in coordination with Chief Deputy Branson on this effort and hope to continue that relationship as well.
Thank you, Doug. Questions? Yes?
I had a brief question. Doug, do you know when the fourth generation diesel is going to become available?
Fourth generation
diesel, the clean burning diesel for trucks and locomotives in California?
For okay, so the Tier 4 locomotives are currently required to be purchased as new locomotives for any of the locomotives that are being purchased. There are technology efforts happening right now just in terms of whether those locomotives are viable and whether the railroads are making significant investment in that. But the technology is there. They're going through the process of validating it. On the truck side, the current standards are being implemented in terms of the truck engine technologies, and so a lot of the effort right now on the next generation relates to the low NOx, whether or not we can, we currently have an optional low NOx standard which has a tiered structure that gets down to a 0.02 gram, but it's not a requirement in terms of when or at what point in time those would be required to be integrated into the fleet. We are looking forward, though, to some of the development at the manufacturer side of getting lower NOx engines. The other item that's moving forward on the truck side is the Phase 2 greenhouse gas standards at the national level and within the state to identify opportunities to reduce the greenhouse gas side of the emissions from trucks.
Isn't Europe on diesel number 4, and then I think we're still using diesel number 2 here in the States?
I'm not as
substantially lower sulfur and cleaner burning. Anything from IRB on that?
That is not my area of expertise, but I could follow up with you in terms of and you're talking about the fuel component?
Correct.
Yeah.
Much lower sulfur component.
Yes.
Diesel, which is substantially cleaner burning.
Yes.
Thanks, Doug. Great to have you back with us again. Can I ask you about the economic portion? I think at your board meeting, GoBiz was going to really be active in that. Can you describe, I mean, it sounds like maybe you've gone in-house with the economic advisor, or is that?
So the economic advisor that we hired was more broadly to address ARB's economic analysis and how we look at economics for all of our programs. They are helping us specifically on freight. We also have, we are looking at 2 contracting opportunities. One that would help on the specific effort over the next year on the sustainable freight strategy, but also improving the economic tools and data availability in the longer term. We know that freight economics is not something that is well modeled or understood, and so there's a recognition that even if we can't complete that work over the next year, that is going to be a continuing need moving forward. In both of those cases, and along with our economic advisor, we are taking those into the discussion with CalSTA and Caltrans and GoBiz, as well as CEC, to provide an opportunity for all of the agencies to weigh in on how the economic work proceeds. Specifically, GoBiz is looking at the economic need within the freight strategy work that we're doing and providing some guidance on how to move forward. So Panarea we actually have a meeting with GoBiz next week to continue kind of exploring to what degree they can be involved, but definitely they understand that their consultation on the economic side is going to be very important.
Well, I think if we tie that into Katie's presentation earlier about getting to our 2050 goals, that we've got to get a lot of bang for our buck, and we can't afford missteps with this. So I think every dollar needs to really be spent in an effective manner so that we can achieve our mutual objectives, because I worry that it's a huge transition to go to zero emission in the supply chain with many private partners. The useful life of many of the assets are huge. Our Class 1s run on nationwide systems, so it's going to be difficult for us. So we're going to have to really, I think, work hard with a lot of transparency and hold ourselves accountable, really, to invest wisely, because it's pretty clear that we have some pretty aggressive objectives that aren't going to happen without a lot of hard work of everybody pulling in the same direction. So appreciate your list of options. I think that in regard to the Energy Commission, we have to be a little careful in terms of our 50-50-50, which requires us to reduce our energy usage. And so if we migrate the supply chain to zero emission, I'm going to use a little more electricity. And I think we really need to recognize that in our energy planning. I'm not sure. The Energy Commission tells us that they have allowed for that, but I think there's going to be some pretty high demand on the electricity sector if we migrate to zero emissions. So I want to make sure and that we don't have conflicting regulations, and we're talking about benchmarking and our energy reporting. So on the one hand, if we're pushing to increase electricity usage, we can't ask those partners to be dinged for using more electricity. So I think we have to find that balance in there. And I think on the facilities emission cap, we're going to have to work very, very hard on that because of all of the partners and all of the responsibilities. And the freight sector has a huge component of 3PL providers, and so it's really going to be, I think, complicated to get to the right person who can make the right decision in the most efficient manner. So thanks for being here today and your continued passion to get this right. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other comments, commissioners? Thank you, Doug. I really appreciate that. I was pleased and honored to testify before the Air Resources Board on behalf of the Commission on the Sustainable Freight Strategy. And what was compelling to me as a takeaway was that everybody from every side, from every angle, recognized that this is 1/3 of our state's economy that you're messing with. And so we've got to get it right, 1/3 of our state's economy. And so I really appreciate your efforts there.
Thank you.
I want to let us know we have an action item here with a letter to go to the Air Resources Board. And I would also, if the letter is acceptable to the Commission, we might challenge our staff after, should you approve this letter, to take Doug Ito's challenge to us and maybe follow up with what policies and strategies should be included or considered in addition to what we've written here. So I would just say maybe an extra thought. Yes, Susan.
And I wanted to respond to as well. I think Doug's recommendation for the Commission is excellent, and it is actually in line with Senate Bill 486 and what we talked about today on the California Transportation Plan, as well as, our charge in SB 486 looking at the interregional plan, the priorities for investment in the shop. And so we have an opportunity, the commission has an opportunity to draft guidelines for the next iteration of the California Transportation Plan, and also to look at performance measures and targets in the investments that we make in the rehabilitation and preservation of the system. So I think it's something that, the commission is going to need to be looking at anyways, and so I just wanted to throw that out.
Great, thank you, Susan.
Do you want to put that into our letter?
I think that they need some time to develop that list, the little longer list, but for now. And I'm sure, Doug, you've challenged us today, so you'll accept a second letter if we get one to you, correct? Thank you.
Well, I was going to suggest, Madam Chair, that we just have a sentence or a paragraph acknowledging the request that's been made, and we'll get back to it.
Very good. That's a good amendment. Thank you very much. And with that recommendation for amendment, is there a motion to approve? From Ms. Inman, and a second from Mr. Assemi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstention on our phone? Okay, I got an aye. I heard one. Okay, motion passes. Thank you very, very much. On item number 19, item 20, Lori Waters, adoption of the 2015 Active Transportation Program guidelines, and another action item for us.
Yes, Commissioners, this is an action item to adopt the 2015 Active Transportation Program Guidelines, Metropolitan Planning Organization Competitive Component for 3 MPOs, SACOG, SANDAG, and Tulare County Association of Governments. The ATP's governing statute, Senate Bill 99, allows the Commission to adopt guidelines proposed by MPOs for administering their MPO competitive component of the ATP. The MPO guidelines must be generally consistent with the state guidelines, but they are allowed discretion in certain areas, such as asking for a supplemental call for projects and project selection criteria and weighting. SACOG, SANDAG, and TCAG are all electing to use additional project selection criteria. SACOG will be holding a supplemental call for projects. They will also require that all applicants include a local match and require a minimum funding request for non-infrastructure projects. TCAG is modifying the definition of disadvantaged communities to include severely disadvantaged communities. Commission staff reviewed all 3 of the MPO's guidelines and found them consistent with the statewide guidelines. Staff recommends your approval of SACOG, SANDAG's, and TCAG's 2015 ATP guidelines.
Thank you, Lori. Questions, comments? This is a request for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gilmetti. Second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Assemi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? And on the phone? Thank you. Motion carries. Now we're moving on to item 61, Project Business Matters. Stephen Mahler.
Yes, Commissioners. Items 61, 62, and 63 are TCIF program items. Under item 61, we are adding 2 projects to this TCIF program. The Pepper interchange improvements on I-10 and Hellman Avenue grade crossing. Under item 62, we are approving the baseline agreement for the I-10 Pepper interchange improvement. And our item 63, we are allocating $1.16 million to the Pepper interchange improvement. Staff recommends approval of all 3 items.
Move approval.
Second. Motion by Gilmetti, second by Assemi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? On the phone? Great, thank you very much. Motion carries. For 61, 62, 63, number 64.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 64 is an allocation of $12.6 million from the risk reserve of the Presidio Parkway P3 project. This project was discussed by the Delivery Committee, and here for the $12.6 million is for basically 2 categories of things. One is $3 million towards change orders for changed conditions, and $9 million towards claim settlements. The developer of the project had about $17 million worth of claims. The department has worked with them and taken that number down to slightly more than half of that number to about $9 million. Staff has reviewed all of this, the committee has reviewed all of this, and staff would be recommending that you approve this $12.6 million allocation from the project's risk reserve.
I move that we make that approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Arp, second by Mr. Gilmetti. All the, question?
Well, so this empties our contingency, right?
Yes, the risk reserve is pretty much empty. There's like $400,000 left in something like that.
Okay, Jean, you gotta, no more.
Well, if anything more happens, then these will really be becoming supplemental allocations. But the department assures me that the outstanding issues that they have are really ones that the developer of the project really has no chance of winning in arbitration or in court.
So I do have my motion stands as is. I do have a question regarding your comment. Can Caltrans give, I had heard that the Caltrans appointee to the dispute resolution panel is no longer serving. So can you give me an update on the status of that and how that maybe impacts what's down the road?
We, at one point, we had put the DRB on hold. We had moved to another dispute resolution process, a facilitated dispute resolution. In discussing with the contractor, we are going back to the DRB, and we are looking to change our member of the DRB. So we're in that process now.
Okay.
And I need a vote.
We have a motion, we have a second, we have our questions all answered. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstention on the phone? Thank you. Motion passes. Item number 65.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 65 is a supplemental allocation. This is for the Sonoma 101 at College Avenue project. This is where College Avenue was being widened. At the point when they were developing the plans, they found out that there's a gas station on the south side. The widening was to be around the center line of the College Avenue. Decided to move the project to the north to avoid the gas station, which would have cost about $4 million to condemn. In moving the project to the north by about 20 feet, there was an error made by the designers that either forgot to recalculate elevations or recalculated them incorrectly. When the contractor started building the project, there were differences in the elevation between 6 inches and 18 inches. The project had to be stopped, had to be slightly redesigned, more material needed to be used, and lost a season of construction. So the bill now is at $1.22 million. Staff recommends that you approve this supplemental allocation.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gilmetti, second by Mr. Arp. Questions, comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Mr. Tavaloni?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Item number 66.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 66 is an allocation of $1.8 million on the aeronautics program for aid to airports acquisition and development projects. There are 8 of these projects. Staff recommends approval.
Motion by Mr. Asimi.
Second.
Second by Mr. Arp. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Mr. Tavaloni? Very good. Matter passes. Item number 67.
Yes, Commissioners. Item 67 is a future consideration of funding approval for an environmental document. This is for the East Bay Bus Rapid Transit Project. There are significant and unavoidable impacts due to traffic, and Alameda Contra Costa County Transportation District adopted a statement of overriding consideration, finding that the benefits of the project outweigh the impacts. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the EIR findings, overriding considerations, and approve the project for future consideration of funding.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Asimi, second by Mr. Arp. Questions, comments, all those in favor? Any opposition? Any abstention? Mr. Tavaloni? Thank you very much. Item number 87, Laurel.
Yes, Commissioners, items 87 through 89, these are requests for STIP allocations for one state-administered project and 18 locally administered projects, and staff recommends your approval of these three items.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Arp, second by Mr. Asemi. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstention? Mr. Tavaloni? Thank you, sir. Matters 87, 88, 89 pass, are approved. Item number 90.
Yes, Commissioners, tab 90, this is an action item. This is a request for an advance allocation for construction totaling $15 million for the I-80 San Pablo Dam Interchange Project in Contra Costa County. This project has scope that impacts a school, and they're hoping to get the construction completed prior to the next school year. I would also note that there are some related ATP actions to this project. Staff recommends your approval of this allocation.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Gilmetti, second by Mr. Arp. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Mr. Tavaloni? Thank you. Matter passes. Item number 91.
Yes, Commissioners, this is an action item. This is a request from the department for an allocation of federal funds totaling $824.3 million. This is the second half of the annual lump sum allocation of federal funds for local assistance. This half has grown a little bit due to August redistribution, and staff recommends your approval of this allocation.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Arp, second by Mr. Asemi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Abstained? Mr. Tavaloni? Thank you. Matter passes. Item number 92.
Commissioners, this is an action item. The ATP guidelines allow for MPOs to submit a contingency list of projects with their ATP MPO component that can be amended into their program in the event a program project is delivered for less or if a project fails. MTC has determined that one of the 11 projects programmed in their 2014 ATP program, the Santa Rosa Jennings Avenue bicycle pedestrian crossing at Smart Railroad Tracks, has a high risk of not meeting their delivery deadline. Therefore, MTC is requesting to deprogram that project. The $8,157,000 of savings from the deprogramming would be used to program the full ATP funding request for the currently programmed Contra Costa Transportation Authority Riverside Avenue pedestrian overcrossing replacement project. MTC would also program the top 3 scoring projects from their contingency list that can be delivered in 15-16. MTC will still have some savings left unprogrammed, and they will bring forward another amendment at the June meeting to program those funds to other projects from their contingency list. Staff recommends your approval of this amendment.
We have an action item?
I have a question.
We have a question.
I had a question. I'm not sure I understood the answer, and I should have followed up a little bit more with staff. So you have a project that made the first cut on the ATP list. There were a lot of other projects that didn't make it, right?
Right.
Now this project isn't going to deliver. So now MTC has another project in their particular umbrella of projects that they would rather apply that money to. But there were other projects on the list that didn't make it that may not be in MTC's umbrella, and how, is that a fair way to do this, considering there were other projects that may have been able to make the cut if this project wasn't in the list?
This is from the MPO component, so all of their projects from their list would have been from their MPO region.
Okay.
So they're just following along. They just took the projects that were directly below the line that didn't get funded, the next highest scoring projects, and just funded those.
Okay.
Commissioner, half the program was a statewide competition. This is under there.
Got it. Thank you.
And thus we...
I only needed 2 applications of the answer to work.
So you're moving approval, Mr. Arp?
Yes, I am moving approval.
Excellent. And I hear a second from Mr. Asemi. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Abstained? And Mr. Tavaloni? Aye. Item 92 passes. Item 93.
Commissioners, this is an action item to allocate funds to projects programmed in the 2014 ATP. One of the projects listed in the book item, project number 6, the City of Berkeley Safe Routes to School project, is being withdrawn. So with that change noted, this item is to allocate $7,679,000 of ATP funds to 33 projects. Staff recommends your approval.
Motion to approve
So moved.
by Mr. Semi, second by Ms. Inman. All those in favor? Any opposition? Any abstentions? Mr. Tavaloni? Thank you. Motion carries. Item number 94.
Commissioners, this is an action item. This is a yellow item because of a change. One of the allocations has been removed and will instead request allocation in June. This has been noted on the change list. So with that change, the item is to allocate $2,382,000 of ATP funds to 4 projects programmed in fiscal year 15-16. Staff recommends your approval.
The recommendation for approval.
So moved.
Mr. Art, second by Mrs. Inman. All those in favor? Any opposition? Any abstention? Mr. Tavaloni? Thank you. Item number 94 passes. Number 95.
Yes,
Stephen.
Commissioners. Items 95 and 96 are projects with initial allocation that exceed program amount by more than 20%. Under item 95, this is a Humboldt 290 curve correction project. When the original project initiation document was being developed, it was assumed that the geology of the area was general geology that they have encountered in the area, in the general area before. After the environmental document was completed, they did a geotechnical investigation of the site and found out that the material was much worse. They had to do some blasting and material removal, which increased the cost of the project. This project is being brought forward for its initial allocation, and the allocation now is greater than what was originally programmed. Staff recommends that you approve this project for an allocation of $2.339 million.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Arp, second by Mr. Asemi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Mr. Tavaloni? Very good. Thank you. That's 95 and 96?
No, that was 95.
That was just
Now we-
95, 96.
96 is a request to allocate $41.75 million to a LA-10 project. This originally was programmed as a pavement rehabilitation, but it's being combined with a widening project in the same vicinity, and it was determined that as long as they're going to be in there, they might as well increase the scope of the rehabilitation project to include site distance vertical curve corrections, and that brought up the cost of the project by $8.6 million. I think this is a good thing for the general public to have everything done at the same time, be in there once, in and out, and staff recommends that you approve the $41.750 million allocation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion for approval by Mr. Asemi, second by Fran Inman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposition? Any abstention? Mr. Tavaloni? Thank you.
I move that we let Mr. Tavaloni make some move. I miss his move it.
We need your moving some stuff, Joe.
You're going to get it.
We do. They're getting movement fatigue over here, I think. All right, item number 96 passes. Item number 97, Juan.
Thank you, Commissioners. This item is an action item. This is the monthly allocation for shop projects. This month is $101,698,000 for 35 shop projects. Staff recommends your approval.
There we go. Motion by Mr. Tavaloni, second by Ms. Inman. All those in favor? Aye. Opposition? Abstentions? Thank you. Motion carries. 98.
98 is an advanced financial allocation for shop projects program in 15-16 for $8,784,000. Staff recommends your approval.
There he goes. Mr. Tavalloni moves, Mr. Arp seconds. Mr. Gilmetti seconds. Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposition, abstentions, matter carries. 99.
Commissioners, this is the annual allocation for the waterborne ferry operations in the San Francisco Bay Area. This year, they're requesting $3,211,000 in accordance with the budget appropriation. Staff recommends your approval.
I have a question.
We have a question here
Yeah.
for Mr. Gilmetti.
You know, we instituted that waterborne ferry, but do we ever get an annual report on what they're doing, how they're doing?
No, not directly from Bauta.
Can some point in time we find out what they're doing?
I can contact them and get an update on this.
Thank you.
Very good. So we have a motion for Mr. Tavalloni and a second by Mr. Arp for item number 99. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposition, abstention, matter carries with the direction to get some more information from our waterborne ferry as well. Item number 100.
100, Commissioners, is also an action item. This is allocation of $1,100,000 for the Intercity Rail Program for a project in San Diego County. Staff recommends your approval.
Motion by Mr. Tavalloni, second by Mr. Assemi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposition, abstentions, matter carries. Item number 101.
Commissioners, items 101 through 110 are this month's time extension requests. The staff's recommendations are noted in the spreadsheet you received, and staff recommends that you approve items 101 through 110 based on the staff recommendations.
We have a motion by Mr. Tavalloni. Second by Mr. Gilmetti. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, items 101 through 110 are approved. We have one more item here on my list, and that is item number 21, 2015 Rural Counties Pavement Needs Assessment with Garth Hopkins. Sorry to put you at the end.
That's fine. Commissioners, Margot Yap from NCE Consulting Engineers will present a brief overview of the recently completed 2015 Rural Counties Pavement Needs Assessment. The assessment was commissioned by the Rural Counties Task Force, which is composed of 26 regional transportation planning agencies to help highlight the pavement conditions in each of these counties. Rural roads in the areas of our state provide an important link to both the residents living in these counties, to the visitors for recreational purposes, and for emergency access. This study indicated the pavement condition in these counties was lower than the statewide average. The result from these studies should help highlight to both the Commission and to Caltrans of the important role of these rural roads that serve in order to for these areas to be connected to other regions of the state. And with that, Margot.
Thank you. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I won't take up too much of your time today. As Garth mentioned, we have a little presentation on the report we recently did, and I just wanted to kind of introduce the rural counties and some of the facts and figures that are out there, and I thought I could do it in a series of pie charts. And the first is that when we look at the rural counties, as Garth mentioned, these are the 26 rural counties, mostly in Northern California. In terms of population, it's not a big number. I mean, they're only 5.6% of the population in the state. But then you start looking at the miles of roads that they maintain, and suddenly the number kind of starts jumping. Look at the lane miles, it's about 14%. When we look at the land area that they comprise, it's almost more than a third, it's 41% of the state. So because the land area is so large, it makes a lot of sense why they have so many more miles than the population would go. But then the part that I think really caught our attention was that when we look at the funding that goes to the rural counties, they get about 9.4%, which is a little bit less than the rest of California. So from our conclusion really is that the rural counties disproportionately share a larger burden of the funding, of the needs on the pavements, but they don't get necessarily all the funding that they have. So let me share with you some other things that we found. Many of you are familiar with this chart. I've shared this with you when we did the California statewide local needs and assessment. This one is specifically just looking at the counties. When we looked at the average pavement condition index, it was about 58. And compared to the statewide, that's about 8 points below. And this is probably something that I think we realize when we get off the highways, get off some of the main urban roads and get into the rural parts of the state, the roads definitely do require a lot more attention. We took also a look at the individual counties. These are all the colored counties comprise the Rural Counties Task Force. And as you can tell, the red counties are obviously in the worst shape. The blue counties, the lighter blue, are in slightly better shape than the darker blue, but nonetheless, they're what we would call the at-risk condition. And then really only Nevada County is, let me lift this up a little bit, only Nevada County is considered in good condition. So that's it's kind of a sobering statistic that you see. In terms of how bad 58 is, again, I think you're probably familiar with this from the statewide presentation, but we're on a steep part of the curve. In fact, we're actually very close to the threshold of dropping down to the yellow part of the curve where it would be considered poor or very poor. In terms of the dollars, the key point we'd want to make with this chart is if we can keep roads in the green condition, it's going to cost a lot less to maintain than if we would let them drop down to the yellows or the red condition. So again, the same fundamental information that we share with you in the statewide, but just worse. The other thing then I think that was illuminating to us, we took a look at the whole state and we plotted some information from the needs by county. And what you can see on this chart here is that the darker the color, in this case red, the higher the needs. So it's not very surprising to see that in very urban counties like Los Angeles or San Diego, the pavement needs are pretty high. They have a lot of roads, a significantly higher cost to maintain, and you can see by contrast, the rural counties actually don't show it in terms of raw numbers very big needs. But when we look at it on a per capita basis, and recognizing again that a lot of allocations are based on formulas that include population and mileage, we see that the rural counties, for every rural resident, they shoulder a higher burden of the roads that the cost of maintaining the roads than an urban resident does. And that was very significant. In some cases, it was as much as 14 times more. In terms of numbers, we looked at the 20-year needs for all the rural roads. It added up to about $7 billion. There's currently about $3 billion in funding available, and so the projected shortfall was about $4 billion. The state highways that are within these rural counties, we got this from the SHOP program, they added up to about $700 million. That's 10 years. So really briefly, our conclusions are kind of fairly straightforward. The roads are not very good. They're in very poor condition, and they are projected to drop down to about 42 with the existing dollars. The deferred maintenance, I think, again, I've said this to you in the past, that's a big concern for us. It's going to increase almost 50% in the next 20 years. The shortfall is about $4 billion, and the funding that we need is about $7 billion. The last thing I think I wanted to leave you with is, again, to kind of reemphasize the point that the funding shortfall, when we look at it for the rural counties, is much higher for per capita than it is for the urban areas. There are some reasons why. The economies of scale in many of the rural counties aren't always available because there's huge distances. I know in Mariposa County, for instance, to get to some of the roads in northern Mariposa, you have to actually go out of the county and get back into the county simply because of the way that the road network lies. The other thing is that most urban counties, like the self-help counties particularly, have been fairly successful at bootstrapping themselves with sales tax measures. In the rural counties, that's not always possible. I know I talked with the El Del Norte County, for instance, with a population of less than somewhere in the order of 25,000, 30,000 people. Even if they did pass a sales tax, it would not raise anything sufficient to pay for their pavement needs. So I think all we wanted to highlight in this presentation was for you to get a flavor of the unusual, or perhaps the difficulties that rural counties face as opposed to some of the more urban counties. Thank you.
Margot, excellent presentation. Questions from commissioners? Mr. Gilmetti.
Margot, I always enjoy your reports and your updates. However, I'm really looking forward to one that's a little more optimistic.
That would be nice.
Thank you. Ms. Inman.
Margaret, I just have a question. On the slide that says, how bad is 58? On the horizontal axis, it's time in years. How
Yes.
many, that decline, how many years are they?
That depends a little bit on the type of roads. All roads are designed to last about 20 years. That's a standard design. But there are some local roads, for instance, that might last a little bit longer than that, maybe 30. And then on the other hand, there are some high-volume materials that might last only about 15. So it's a representative of different
So
classifications.
it's kind of like an
roads.
average, yeah. Okay, thank you.
You know, one other comment, that just brought to mind, you know, if we did slurry seal, if we did some things on an ongoing basis, these roads would last a lot longer than 20 years, right?
Correct.
Plus, if we had new product that could get through Caltrans a little bit faster, just saying, they could last for 130 years. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Very, very good presentation, as always. It's time now for public comment. I don't have any speaker slips.
I have one comment. I'm not public, but I am.
We'll count.
I just want it noted that Commissioner Cavalloni moved the single largest item on the whole agenda today, so it once again shows his long reach.
Oh, goodness. Joe, you're appreciated wherever you are.
Thank you so very much. It's always nice to hear that from someone like,
Whatever his name
Whatever his name was.
you're always my gun-toting hero, you know, and that's why I stick close to you.
Thank you, Joe. And with
Madam Chair?
Oh,
Okay.
yes, Madam.
I'm not public also, but
Public.
I just want to recognize the power of Vince Mamano, because I just got the Federal Register that says the National Freight Advisory Charter was renewed today. So way to go. We appreciate that.
Yes. Personally delivered the please sign it, Mr. Obama message from the commission.
I know people who know people.
It's awesome. Any other comments from our commissioners and from the public? Okay, with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Okay.